Elena Russo's wedding day should have been the happiest of her life. Instead, she's being sold like livestock to a man she's never met, a monster wrapped in an expensive suit. Victor DeLuca doesn't do love. He does power, control, and cold-blooded business. But when he lifts her veil and sees her face, something breaks in his carefully constructed world. She looks exactly like the ghost that's haunted his family for 20 years. This isn't just an arranged marriage anymore. It's a trap neither of them saw coming, and walking away might not be an option either of them survives. If you want to see how far love can grow in the darkest places, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The mirror didn't lie, but Elena wished it would. She stood in the cramped bedroom of her childhood home, staring at her reflection in a wedding dress that cost more than her family had seen in 5 years. White silk clung to her body like a beautiful shroud. The bodice fitted perfectly because Victor DeLuca's people had measured her like she was being tailored for a coffin. The veil cascaded down her back in layers of expensive lace, and the whole thing probably cost enough to pay off half of what her brother owed. Half. Not all. Never all. "You look beautiful, mija." Her mother's voice cracked from the doorway, hands twisted together like she was trying to strangle her own guilt. Elena didn't turn around. If she looked at her mother's face, saw the tears, the apology, the helpless love, she might break. And she couldn't afford to break. Not today. Not when she was the only thing standing between her family and whatever Victor DeLuca did to people who didn't pay their debts. "Marco should be here," Elena said quietly. "He should be the one in this dress, since it's his mess that put me in it." "Elena, where is he, Mama?" Elena finally turned, and her mother flinched at whatever she saw in her daughter's eyes. "Where's my brother on my wedding day? The brother whose gambling debts are the reason I'm marrying a stranger? The brother who borrowed money from the DeLuca family and then ran like a coward when they came to collect?" Maria Russo looked 10 years older than she had a month ago. The lines around her eyes had deepened, her hair had gone grayer, and her hands shook constantly now. "He's scared, baby. He made mistakes, but he's still your brother. He's a selfish bastard who sold me to save his own skin." Elena's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The words cut deep enough at a whisper. "And you let him. What choice did we have?" Her mother's composure finally cracked, tears spilling down weathered cheeks. "They would have killed him, Elena. They would have killed all of us. Victor DeLuca doesn't forgive debts, he collects them. One way or another." Elena knew that. Everyone in their neighborhood knew that. The DeLuca family had run the city's underworld for 3 generations, and Victor DeLuca, young, brilliant, absolutely ruthless, had taken control 5 years ago when his father was murdered. He'd consolidated power with surgical precision, eliminating rivals and traitors with the kind of cold efficiency that made people nervous to even speak his name out loud. And now Elena was going to marry him. Not because he loved her, not because he even knew her, but because Marco had gambled away money he didn't have, made promises he couldn't keep, and when the bill came due, he'd offered the only collateral the family had left: his sister. A knock on the door made them both jump. "It's time," said a voice that didn't belong to anyone in their family. One of Victor's men stationed outside to make sure the bride didn't try to run. As if she could. As if there was anywhere in the city, in the country, that Victor DeLuca couldn't reach if he wanted to. "5 minutes," Maria called out, her voice steadier than her hands. When the footsteps retreated, she moved closer to Elena, reaching up to adjust the veil with trembling fingers. "I'm so sorry, baby. If there was any other way—" "There isn't." Elena caught her mother's hand, squeezed once, then let go. She couldn't afford softness right now. Softness would break her, and broken things were useless. "It's done. Marco made his choice. You made yours. Now I'm making mine." "What choice do you have?" Elena looked at herself one more time in the mirror. A stranger stared back, a woman in white, eyes hard and dry, mouth set in a line that would have made her grandmother proud. The Russo women had always been survivors. They bent, but they didn't break. "I'm choosing to walk down that aisle with my head up," Elena said. "I'm choosing to look him in the eye when he puts that ring on my finger. And I'm choosing to survive whatever comes after. That's my choice, Mama. It's the only one I've got." Her mother pulled her into a fierce hug, and for just a moment, Elena let herself be held, let herself remember what it felt like to be protected instead of being the protection. Then she pulled away, straightened her shoulders, and nodded toward the door. Let's get this over with. The church was small, intimate, which was a polite way of saying that Victor DeLuca didn't want witnesses to what was essentially a human transaction dressed up in religious ceremony. Elena's heels clicked against marble floors as she walked through the vestibule, her mother on one side, her father on the other. Roberto Russo looked like he'd aged a decade in the past month, too, his face gray and drawn, eyes fixed straight ahead like he couldn't bear to look at his daughter. He'd been a proud man once, owned a small construction business, provided for his family, held his head high in the neighborhood. Marco's debts had broken him too. I can still, her father started, voice hoarse. I can still try to talk to them, offer something else, the business, the house, anything. Papa, stop. Elena's voice was gentle but firm. We both know they don't want the business or the house. They want compliance, loyalty, a message sent to everyone who owes them money. She straightened the bouquet of white roses someone had thrust into her hands earlier. I'm that message. The doors to the sanctuary opened and Elena's breath caught despite herself. The church was beautiful in its simplicity. Candles flickered along the walls, casting dancing shadows across empty pews. There were maybe 20 people present, all of them Victor's people, she assumed. Not family, not friends, witnesses to a contract, nothing more. And at the end of the aisle, standing perfectly still in a black suit that probably cost more than her father's car, was Victor DeLuca. Elena had never seen him in person before, had only heard the stories, seen the occasional newspaper photo when his business dealings, the legitimate ones, made the news. None of it had prepared her for the reality of him. He was young, mid-30s maybe, tall and lean, with the kind of build that spoke of discipline rather than vanity. Dark hair cut short, dark eyes that tracked her movement down the aisle with the focus of a predator watching prey. His face was all sharp angles and hard lines, handsome in the way a blade was handsome, beautiful and dangerous. He didn't smile as she approached, didn't show any emotion at all. He simply watched her, hands clasped in front of him, posture perfect, like he was attending a board meeting instead of his own wedding. The music swelled, something classical that Elena didn't recognize, and she forced herself to keep moving. One step, another. Her father's arm was rigid beneath her hand, his breathing shallow and fast. Her mother had already been escorted to a pew, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue that one of Victor's men had provided with surprising gentleness. 20 steps became 10, 10 became 5. And then she was there, standing in front of the man who now owned her life. And her father was releasing her arm with a grip that said, I'm sorry, and I love you, and I failed you all at once. Victor's eyes finally moved from her face to her father's. Mr. Russo. His voice was exactly what Elena had expected, deep, controlled, devoid of warmth. Your family's debt is settled. You have my word. It wasn't gratitude her father was supposed to express. It was relief that he and Marco would live to see tomorrow. Thank you, Roberto managed, then stepped back, leaving Elena alone with her soon-to-be husband. The priest cleared his throat, a nervous little sound that suggested he knew exactly what kind of ceremony this was and wanted it over with as quickly as possible. Shall we begin? Victor's gaze returned to Elena, and for the first time something flickered in those dark eyes. Curiosity, maybe, or assessment, like he was trying to figure out what kind of woman had been delivered to him in a wedding dress. We shall, Victor said. The ceremony was brief, efficient. The priest rattled through the traditional words with the speed of someone who'd been paid very well to not ask questions, and Victor's responses came in that same controlled voice. No hesitation, no emotion, just words spoken because the ritual required them. When it was Elena's turn, she heard her own voice say, I do, and marveled at how steady it sounded, how calm, like she agreed to marry dangerous strangers every day. The rings, the priest prompted, and one of Victor's men, a mountain of a human being with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, stepped forward with a small velvet box. Victor took it, extracted a ring that caught the candlelight, and threw it back in brilliant fragments. Diamond. Massive. Probably worth more than her parents' house. He reached for her hand, and Elena forced herself not to flinch when his fingers closed around hers. His touch was warm, steady, the hands of someone who was used to holding power and never letting it slip. "With this ring," Victor said, sliding the band onto her finger with practiced precision, "I thee wed." The ring was a perfect fit. Of course it was. Victor DeLuca didn't do anything halfway. Then it was her turn, and the mountain of a man handed her a simpler band. Platinum, elegant, masculine. Elena took it with fingers that only trembled slightly, reached for Victor's left hand, and slid the ring home. "With this ring, I thee wed," she whispered. For just a second, Victor's fingers tightened around hers. A barely perceptible squeeze that might have been acknowledgement or warning or something else entirely. Then he released her, and the moment passed. "By the power vested in me," the priest said quickly, clearly ready to be done with this whole affair, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." A pause. A nervous glance at Victor. "You may kiss the bride." Elena's heart stuttered. Somehow, in all her mental preparation for this day, she hadn't actually thought about this part. The kiss. The physical seal on a contract written in desperation and signed in surrender. Victor studied her for a long moment, and Elena wondered what he saw. A terrified girl playing at bravery? A chess piece moved into position? A problem to be managed? Then he moved, one hand coming up to the veil that still covered her face, fingers finding the edge of the lace with surprising gentleness. "Let's see what I've bought," he murmured, too quiet for anyone else to hear. And he lifted the veil. Later, Elena would remember this moment in fragments. Disconnected pieces of a whole that didn't make sense until she could step back and see the entire picture. Victor's hand, frozen halfway through the motion of pushing back her veil. His face going absolutely still in a way that made him look like a statue. Beautiful and cold and utterly inhuman. The sound of his breath catching. Barely audible, but she was close enough to hear it. And his eyes. Those dark, controlled eyes that hadn't shown a flicker of emotion through the entire ceremony, suddenly blazing with something that looked like shock and recognition and horror all tangled together. "What?" The word came out rough, like it had been dragged over broken glass. Victor's other hand came up, fingers hovering near her face but not quite touching, like he didn't trust himself to make contact. "That's not possible." Elena's pulse hammered against her throat. "What's not possible?" But Victor wasn't looking at her anymore. Not really. He was looking through her at something or someone else entirely, and the expression on his face made something cold slither down her spine. "Sir?" The scarred man stepped forward, hand moving inside his jacket toward what was probably a weapon. "Is there a problem?" "Get everyone out!" Victor's voice had gone flat. Empty. The voice of a man who just had the ground yanked out from under him and was trying very hard not to fall. "Now! But the ceremony is over. Get everyone out!" The scarred man must have heard something in that tone that Elena missed, because he moved immediately, gesturing to the other men scattered throughout the church. They herded the confused priest and Elena's parents out with the kind of efficiency that suggested they'd done this before, cleared rooms, removed witnesses, made problems disappear. Elena's mother called her name once, voice high with panic, but the doors closed before Elena could respond. And then it was just her and Victor standing at the altar in a church full of flickering candles and heavy silence. "What's going on?" Elena demanded, fear finally cracking through the careful control she'd maintained all day. "What did I do?" Victor's hand finally made contact, fingers brushing her cheek with a touch so light it might have been an accident. His eyes searched her face with desperate intensity, tracing features like he was trying to solve an impossible equation. "Your name," he said hoarsely. "Your full name." "Elena Maria Russo, you know that. Your people did the background check. Your mother's maiden name." Elena's brain stuttered over the question. Of all the things she'd expected him to ask, that wasn't even on the list. "Castellano. Maria Castellano. Why does that matter?" Something cracked in Victor's expression, a foundation giving way beneath carefully constructed walls. "Castellano," he repeated, and it sounded like a curse, like a prayer, like the answer to a question he'd been asking for years. Jesus Christ. I don't understand. How old are you? 26. Victor, what is this about? He laughed. It was not a pleasant sound, too sharp, too brittle, like glass breaking under pressure. 26. Of course you are. The timing would be perfect, wouldn't it? His hand dropped from her face and he stepped back, putting distance between them like she might be contagious. Did you know? When you agreed to this marriage, did you know who you look like? I don't know what you're talking about. Mara. The name came out like he was forcing broken glass past his teeth. Mara DeLuca. Or she would have been, if my father had lived long enough to marry her. Elena shook her head, confusion mixing with the fear that had been her constant companion for weeks. I've never heard that name. I don't know who that is. She was... Victor's jaw worked, muscles jumping beneath skin gone pale. She was supposed to be my stepmother. My father fell in love with her against every rule, every bit of common sense he had. She was young, beautiful, kind, everything he wasn't. He was going to marry her, legitimize her, bring her into the family. Past tense. All of it past tense. Elena's stomach twisted. What happened to her? The same thing that happened to him. Victor's voice had gone cold again, but beneath the ice, Elena could hear something raw and wounded. The night before their wedding, someone put a bullet in my father's head. Mara disappeared the same night. We found her car at the docks, blood on the seats, but no body. Never found a body. I'm sorry, Elena whispered, because what else could she say? That's terrible. But I still don't understand what that has to do with me. Look at yourself. Victor grabbed her hand, dragged her toward one of the church's side rooms where a small mirror hung on the wall. He positioned her in front of it, stood behind her, and Elena finally saw what he saw. What he couldn't stop seeing, Victor pulled something from his inside jacket pocket. A photograph, old and worn like it had been handled too many times. He held it up next to her reflection, and Elena's breath stopped. The woman in the photo could have been her twin. Same dark hair, same dark eyes, same delicate bone structure. The nose was identical, the mouth, the curve of the jaw. Even the expression, a slight smile, warm and genuine, was one Elena had seen on her own face 1,000 times. That's impossible, Elena breathed. That's what I said. Victor's reflection in the mirror looked haunted. But here you are. Mara Castellano's face, 20 years later wearing a wedding dress in my family's church. He met her eyes in the glass. So I'm going to ask you one more time, and I need you to think very carefully before you answer. Did you know? No. Elena turned to face him directly, needing him to see the truth in her eyes. I swear to you, I have never seen that picture before. I've never heard of Mara Castellano or Mara DeLuca, or whatever her name was. I don't know anything about your father's murder or her disappearance. But your mother's maiden name is Castellano. It's not that uncommon a name. In this city, it is. Victor was thinking now. She could see it happening behind his eyes. Pieces moving, patterns forming, connections being drawn. Castellano isn't just a name here. It's a family, was a family. They controlled the docks 20 years ago, until my father pushed them out. Most of them scattered, changed names, disappeared into legitimate business. His gaze sharpened. Where was your mother born? Here, in the city. And her parents? I don't know. They died before I was born. Mama doesn't talk about them much. Because she doesn't want you asking questions that might get dangerous answers. Victor was moving now, pacing the small room like a caged animal. Castellano. The timing fits, the age fits, the resemblance is impossible to explain any other way. Any other way than what? Elena's voice rose despite her best efforts. What are you saying? Victor stopped pacing, turned to face her fully. I'm saying that you might be family, distant, probably. Cousin, second cousin, something, but connected by blood to the woman my father loved and lost. The room tilted. Elena reached out, found the wall, used it to steady herself. That's insane. Is it? Victor moved closer, and this time his presence felt different. Not threatening, but intense, focused. Your mother's family controlled the docks. Mara's family controlled the docks. Your mother's maiden name is Castellano. Mara's family name was Castellano. You look exactly like a woman who disappeared 20 years ago, and the timing of your birth lines up perfectly with when she would have had a child if she'd survived. He leaned in, close enough that she could see gold flecks in his dark eyes. You want to tell me that's all coincidence? I want to tell you that I don't know. Elena's control finally snapped, fear and confusion and anger all boiling over at once. I came here today thinking I was going to marry a stranger to save my family from my brother's debts. I put on this dress and walked down that aisle and said vows I didn't mean to a man I'd never met, and I was prepared for that. I was ready to be your wife in name only, to live in your house and follow your rules and survive whatever this marriage means. She shoved the veil back, tired of the lace obscuring her vision, and met his eyes with all the defiance she had left. But this? You looking at me like I'm a ghost? Like I'm part of some conspiracy from 20 years ago? I don't know how to prepare for that. I don't know what you want me to say. Silence fell between them, heavy and charged. Outside, Elena could hear muted voices. Victor's men, probably, keeping her family corralled until they got orders otherwise. I don't know what I want you to say either, Victor admitted finally. This wasn't supposed to happen. You were supposed to be a simple transaction. Your brother's debt for your cooperation. A marriage in name only to send a message to others who might think they can cheat the DeLuca family. His hand came up again, fingers barely brushing her cheek. But you're not simple at all, are you? I'm just Elena Russo, a girl whose brother ruined her life. No. Victor's thumb traced her jawline with surprising gentleness. You're Elena DeLuca now, my wife, and possibly the key to answering questions that have haunted me for 20 years. That's when Elena understood. This wasn't about love or attraction or even desire. This was about obsession, about a mystery that had never been solved, a murder that had never been avenged, a woman who'd vanished without a trace. And Elena had just walked into the center of it all wearing a white dress and her face. What happens now? She asked quietly. Victor's hand dropped and he stepped back, that mask of control sliding back into place. But Elena had seen beneath it now, had seen the man who still grieved his father, who still searched for answers in old photographs, who looked at her and saw a ghost he couldn't let go. Now? Victor straightened his jacket, smoothed his tie, became the crime boss everyone feared again. Now you come home with me. We'll figure out the rest as we go. That's not much of a plan. It's the only one I have. He moved toward the door, paused with his hand on the handle. One more thing, Elena. This conversation? Everything I just told you about Mara, about my father, about your possible connection to it all, that stays between us. My men don't need to know. Your family doesn't need to know. As far as the world is concerned, this is exactly what it looks like. A business arrangement sealed with a wedding. And what is it really? Victor looked back at her, and for just a moment, something vulnerable flickered across his face. I have no idea, but I'm going to find out. He opened the door. Come. Your family will want to say goodbye. Elena followed because what choice did she have? But as she walked past him, she caught his arm, made him look at her. I'm not her, she said firmly. Whatever Mara was to your father, whatever history exists there, I'm not her. I'm me. I know. But the way he said it, the way he looked at her, suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. Or maybe he was, but he didn't want to be. They emerged from the side room to find the church vestibule full of controlled chaos. Elena's parents stood against one wall, flanked by two of Victor's men who were trying very hard to look casual about the fact that they were armed guards. Her mother's face was blotchy from crying, her father's expression carved from stone. Mama, Papa. Elena moved toward them, but Victor's hand caught her elbow, not rough, but firm. 5 minutes, he said. Say your goodbyes. Then we leave. He released her, stepped back to confer with the scarred man in low, urgent tones. Elena watched him for a moment, the stranger who was now her husband, and wondered what kind of hell she'd just walked into. Then her mother was pulling her into a tight embrace, and Elena let herself be held one more time. Are you okay? Maria whispered against her hair. Did he hurt you? What happened in there? I'm fine, Mama. We just talked about expectations. The lie came easily. She was getting good at that. Everything's fine. You don't have to do this. Her father's voice was rough, broken. We'll find another way. I'll talk to Marco, make him face up to what he's done. Papa, stop. Elena pulled back from her mother, reached for her father's hand. It's done. We're married. The debt is paid. You and Mama are safe, and that's what matters. You matter, Maria's voice cracked. My baby girl matters more than some debt. Mrs. DeLuca. Victor's voice cut through the rising emotion with surgical precision. Your daughter is under my protection now. You have my word that she will be safe, cared for, and treated with the respect owed to my wife. My wife. The words sounded strange in his mouth, formal, like he was still getting used to the taste of them. Time's up. The scarred man stepped forward, not quite threatening, but close. Boss wants to leave. Elena hugged her parents one more time. Quick, fierce embraces that said everything words couldn't. And then she was moving toward the church doors, toward the car waiting outside, toward a life she'd never wanted and couldn't escape. Victor fell into step beside her, his presence a solid wall between her and the world. As they stepped out into the late afternoon sunshine, Elena saw a sleek black car waiting at the curb, engine running, another man standing at attention by the rear door. After you, Mrs. DeLuca, Victor said, gesturing toward the open door. Elena climbed in, the white dress pooling around her feet in expensive folds. Victor slid in beside her, the door closed with a solid thunk, and the car pulled away from the church, from her family, from the only life she'd ever known. She watched her parents through the rear window until they were too small to see. Her mother had collapsed against her father, and even from a distance, Elena could see her shoulders shaking with sobs. Her father stood like a statue, one arm around his wife, face turned away from the departing car like he couldn't bear to watch his daughter leave. They'll be taken care of. Victor's voice pulled her attention back to the interior of the car. Your parents' mortgage will be paid off by the end of the week. Your father's business will receive an influx of contracts, legitimate ones. They won't want for anything. And my brother? Elena asked, proud of how steady her voice was. Also taken care of, though perhaps not in the way you mean. Victor adjusted his cufflinks with precise movements. Marco will work off the remainder of his debt through service to my organization. Nothing dangerous, nothing illegal that could come back on him. But he will learn that actions have consequences, and debts, all debts, must be paid. It was more than Marco deserved, more than Elena had expected. Thank you. Don't thank me. Victor's gaze was flat. This isn't kindness. It's investment. You're my wife now, and my wife's family reflects on me. I'm simply protecting my interests. Of course. Everything was business with him. Everything was calculated, controlled, managed. Even marriage to a stranger who looked like the ghost that haunted him. They drove in silence through streets that became progressively nicer buildings, nicer cars, fewer people on the sidewalks. The city's wealthy didn't like to mingle with the masses, Elena thought bitterly. They built their walls high and their gates strong and pretended the rest of the world didn't exist. Finally, the car turned through iron gates that swung open at their approach, revealing a long driveway lined with manicured trees. At the end of it sat a house that made Elena's stomach drop. Mansion didn't begin to cover it. This was money on a scale she'd never experienced. Stone and glass and carefully cultivated beauty that probably required a full-time staff to maintain. Windows gleamed in the late afternoon sun, reflecting back clouds and sky like the house was too perfect to be touched by the real world. "Welcome home," Victor said, and there was no warmth in the words, just fact. This was home now, this palace, this prison, this place where Elena would live out the consequences of her brother's greed. The car stopped in front of massive double doors, and Victor exited smoothly, extending a hand to help Elena out. She took it because refusing seemed petty, and she had bigger battles to fight than whether or not to touch her husband's hand. The doors opened before they reached them, revealing an older woman in a simple black dress and gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her face was lined, but not unkind, her eyes sharp and assessing as they took in Elena from head to toe. "Mrs. Chen," Victor said. "This is my wife, Elena. She'll need rooms prepared, clothes purchased, everything she requires to be comfortable." "Of course, Mr. DeLuca." Mrs. Chen's voice was crisp, professional. "Welcome, Mrs. DeLuca. I'm the head of household. If you need anything, please let me know." "Thank you," Elena managed, feeling completely out of her depth. Victor was already moving into the house, pulling off his jacket and handing it to another staff member who appeared out of nowhere. "Mrs. Chen will show you to your rooms. Dinner is at 8. We dress for dinner." And just like that, he was walking away, disappearing down a hallway without a backward glance, like he'd just dropped off a package instead of brought home his new wife. "This way, Mrs. DeLuca." Mrs. Chen gestured toward a sweeping staircase that curved up to the second floor. Elena followed, the wedding dress suddenly feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. As they climbed, she caught glimpses of the house. Expensive art on the walls, fresh flowers in crystal vases, every surface gleaming with care and money. "These will be your rooms," Mrs. Chen said, opening a door to reveal a suite that was bigger than Elena's entire apartment had been. Bedroom, sitting room, bathroom, visible through another door. All of it decorated in soft blues and creams, elegant and expensive and completely impersonal. "It's beautiful," Elena said, because it was. "Where are Mr. DeLuca's rooms?" "In the east wing." Mrs. Chen moved to the windows, adjusting curtains that didn't need adjusting. "You have complete privacy here, Mrs. DeLuca. Mr. DeLuca is very respectful of boundaries." Separate rooms, separate wings, a marriage that existed on paper and in public, but nowhere else. Elena should have felt relieved, should have been grateful for the space, the freedom, the clear indication that Victor didn't expect anything from her beyond the appearance of a wife. Instead, she felt hollow. "Thank you, Mrs. Chen, that will be all." The older woman nodded and withdrew, closing the door with a soft click. Elena stood in the center of the room for a long moment, still wearing her wedding dress, still feeling the weight of the ring on her finger. Then she moved to the windows, pulled back the curtains, and looked out over gardens that probably employed a small army of landscapers. Beyond the manicured lawns and carefully trimmed hedges, she could see the city in the distance, the real city, where real people lived real lives that didn't involve arranged marriages and mysterious resemblances to murdered women. She was a prisoner in paradise, a ghost haunting a house that didn't want her. A chess piece moved into position on a board whose rules she didn't understand. And somewhere in this massive, beautiful house, her husband was looking at a photograph of a dead woman and seeing Elena's face. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Elena watched it disappear behind the city's skyline and wondered if she'd ever feel the warmth of it again. Elena didn't sleep that first night. How could she, when every shadow in the unfamiliar room seemed to hide secrets, and every creak of the old house settling made her wonder if Victor was finally coming to claim what he'd bought. But he never came. She lay in the enormous bed, silk sheets, down pillows, mattress so soft it felt like floating, and stared at the ceiling until dawn light crept through the curtains. Somewhere in the house she could hear movement. Staff, probably. People whose job it was to keep this palace running smoothly, to make sure Victor DeLuca's life remained undisturbed by inconveniences like cooking or cleaning or noticing that his new wife existed. At 7, there was a soft knock on her door. "Mrs. DeLuca?" Mrs. Chen's voice, respectful but insistent. "Breakfast is ready. Mr. DeLuca is waiting." Elena dragged herself out of bed, caught sight of her reflection in the bathroom mirror, and almost didn't recognize herself. The wedding dress hung in the closet now, sealed in a garment bag like evidence of a crime. In its place, someone had filled the enormous walk-in closet with clothes, designer labels, perfect sizes, everything she could possibly need. It was thoughtful and invasive all at once. She chose simple black pants and a cream blouse, pulled her hair back, and went downstairs to meet her husband. The dining room was smaller than she'd expected, but no less elegant. Morning light streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gardens, and a table that could seat 12 held settings for 2 at one end. Victor sat at the head, dressed in dark slacks and a crisp white shirt, reading something on his phone while he drank coffee. He looked up when she entered, those dark eyes tracking her movement across the room with the same intensity he'd shown at the church. Elena, please, sit. She took the chair to his right, accepted coffee from a silent staff member, and tried not to feel like she was participating in some elaborate play where everyone knew their lines except her. Did you sleep well? Victor asked, setting down his phone. The question was polite, mechanical, the kind of thing people asked because social convention demanded it. No, Elena said, because lying seemed pointless. Did you? Something flickered in his expression, surprise maybe, that she'd turned the question back on him. No, I had research to do. Research. Elena's stomach tightened. About Mara? About the Castellano family. Victor leaned back as a plate was set in front of him. Eggs, toast, fruit, arranged with artistic precision. There were 3 Castellano brothers who controlled the docks 20 years ago. Antonio, the eldest, ran the operations. Marco and Giovanni handled enforcement and logistics. Elena's fork paused halfway to her mouth. My mother never mentioned uncles. She wouldn't. After my father pushed them out, the family scattered. Antonio died in prison 5 years ago. Marco disappeared. Probably changed his name, started over somewhere. Giovanni... Victor's jaw tightened. Giovanni was found in the harbor in 1999, bullet in the back of his head. Same week my father died. The food turned to ash in Elena's mouth. You think they're connected? The murders? I think nothing about that week was coincidence. Victor's gaze bore into her. Mara Castellano was Giovanni's daughter. She fell in love with my father despite the bad blood between our families. My father, fool that he was, fell in love back. He thought marrying her would unite the families, create peace. Instead, it got them both killed. Elena set down her fork, appetite gone. And you think my mother was part of that family? That she's Mara's, what, sister, cousin? I think your mother was smart enough to run when things went bad. Change her name, marry someone outside the life, have children, and never look back. Victor's voice was matter-of-fact, but Elena could hear the edge beneath it. I think you're Mara's second cousin, which makes you family to the woman my father loved, and the family that probably killed him. The words hung between them like an accusation. Elena forced herself to meet his eyes, to not look away from the anger and pain and suspicion she saw there. I didn't know. I swear to you, Victor, I had no idea about any of this. I believe you. He said it simply, and somehow that made it worse. Which is why you're here, eating breakfast in my dining room instead of being questioned in a less comfortable location. The threat was gentle, but unmistakable. Victor DeLuca might have married her, might have brought her into his home, but trust was something else entirely. She was guilty by association until proven otherwise. What happens now? Elena asked, echoing her question from yesterday. Do you interrogate me? Investigate my family? Wait for me to slip up and reveal some grand conspiracy that doesn't exist? No. Victor pushed his plate away, meal barely touched. Now I keep you close, very close, because either you're an innocent caught up in your family's history or you're part of something I haven't figured out yet. Either way, you're safest here, where I can protect you. Protect me from what? From people who might see the same resemblance I saw and draw the same conclusions I drew. Victor stood, began pacing the length of the windows with controlled energy. My father's murder was never solved. Neither was Mara's disappearance. 20 years is a long time, but in this world some debts never expire. If someone finds out you exist, that you carry Castellano blood, that you look exactly like the woman who died with my father. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. So I'm bait, Elena said quietly. Or a target. Maybe both. You're my wife. Victor stopped pacing, turned to face her with an expression she couldn't read, which means you're under my protection whether you want it or not. No one touches you without going through me first. It should have been comforting, should have made her feel safe. Instead, it made her feel like property, a valuable asset to be guarded, not a person to be cared for. I'd like to call my parents, Elena said, changing the subject because this one was too heavy to carry before 8 in the morning. Let them know I'm all right. Of course. There's a phone in your room, or you can use mine. Victor gestured to the device still sitting on the table. Though I should warn you, all calls are monitored. Security precaution. Of course they were. Privacy was probably a luxury Victor DeLuca couldn't afford, and by extension, neither could she. I'll use the phone in my room. Elena stood, abandoning her breakfast. When should I be ready for whatever comes next? Noon. We have a lunch meeting with some of my business associates. You'll need to attend. As your wife. As my wife, Victor confirmed. Mrs. Chen will help you prepare. These meetings can be formal. Elena nodded, started toward the door, then paused. Victor? When you look at me, what do you see? He was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough around the edges. Honestly, I don't know anymore. Yesterday, I saw Mara. Today, I see you. Tomorrow. He shook his head. Ask me again in a week. It wasn't the answer she'd hoped for, but it was honest. Elena could work with honest. She left him standing by the windows, coffee growing cold on the table, and went back upstairs to call her mother and pretend that everything was fine. The phone call was brief and painful. Her mother cried, asked questions Elena couldn't answer honestly, and eventually passed the phone to her father, who said even less but somehow communicated more. They were scared for her. Grateful their debt was paid but terrified of the price. And there was nothing Elena could say to make it better because she was terrified too. After she hung up, she sat on the edge of the bed and let herself feel it all. The fear, the anger, the crushing weight of a future she hadn't chosen and couldn't escape. Then she stood, washed her face, and went to find Mrs. Chen. If she had to play the part of Victor DeLuca's wife, she was going to do it right. Mrs. Chen turned out to be a miracle worker. By 11:30, Elena looked like someone who belonged in Victor's world. Hair styled in soft waves, makeup subtle but flawless, wearing a navy dress that was professional and elegant without being showy. Diamond earrings that probably cost more than her father made in a year caught the light when she moved. Perfect, Mrs. Chen said with satisfaction. You look every inch a DeLuca. Elena wasn't sure that was a compliment, but she accepted it anyway. Victor was waiting in the foyer when she came downstairs, and the look on his face when he saw her made something complicated twist in her chest. Not attraction, exactly, but awareness. Recognition that she'd transformed from the terrified girl in a wedding dress to something else entirely. You look beautiful, he said, and it sounded like the words surprised him. Thank you. So do you. He did. The suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, and he wore it like armor. Every inch the dangerous man everyone feared, but polished to a shine that made him look almost civilized. Almost. The car ride was tense with unspoken things. Victor made phone calls in Italian. Elena caught maybe every fifth word, enough to know he was discussing business, but not enough to understand what kind. And she watched the city roll past outside tinted windows. They were meeting at an upscale restaurant downtown, the kind of place that didn't have prices on the menu and required reservations weeks in advance. Unless you were Victor DeLuca, apparently, in which case they cleared the private dining room and had champagne waiting. Remember, Victor said as they approached the entrance, you're here as my wife. Be polite, be gracious, but don't volunteer information. Let me handle the business discussion. I'm not an idiot, Victor. I know, but these men are sharks, and they'll smell weakness. He offered his arm. Stay close to me. Elena took his arm, felt the solid strength of him beneath the expensive fabric, and let him lead her inside. The private dining room was already occupied by 3 men who stood when Victor and Elena entered. All of them were older, 50s or 60s, with the kind of faces that had seen too much and decided profit was worth the nightmares. They assessed Elena with quick, calculating glances before turning their attention to Victor. Victor, good to see you. The tallest of the 3 extended his hand. And this must be your new bride. Congratulations. Thank you, Marcus. Elena, this is Marcus Romano, head of the Romano Shipping Company. To his left is Chen Wei, who manages our West Coast interests, and Antonio Greco, who oversees our European operations. Elena smiled, shook hands, murmured pleasantries, played her part perfectly. They sat, champagne was poured, and the meeting began. Elena had expected to be ignored. Most men she'd known treated women as decorations at business meetings. Pretty things to look at, but not to include in actual conversation. But Victor surprised her. When Marcus asked a question about expansion into new markets, Victor turned to Elena and said, My wife has an interesting perspective on consumer behavior. Elena, what do you think about targeting younger demographics? It was a test. She could see it in his eyes, see him wondering if she'd freeze up or say something stupid, see him giving her the opportunity to prove she was more than just Mara's ghost. Elena thought about her neighborhood, about the people she'd grown up around, young, ambitious, hungry for something better. I think younger markets respond to authenticity more than prestige, she said carefully. They want to know the story behind the product, the values of the company. They'll pay premium prices for things that align with their identity. Chenwei leaned forward, interested. And how would you suggest we communicate that authenticity? Social media, but not corporate social media. Partner with influencers who actually believe in what you're selling. Let the customer feel like they're part of something exclusive, something that reflects who they want to be. The men exchanged glances. Victor's expression remained neutral, but Elena thought she saw approval flicker in his dark eyes. Smart, Marcus said. Victor, your wife has a good head on her shoulders. I know. Victor's hand found hers under the table, squeezed once. That's why I married her. The lie was smooth, practiced, but the touch lingered, and Elena found herself squeezing back. The meeting continued for another 2 hours. Food appeared, tiny portions of beautiful things that tasted expensive, and conversation flowed around her. Business, mostly, with references to operations and territories and deals that Elena understood were probably illegal but cloaked in legitimate language. She stayed quiet unless directly addressed, observed the dynamics, and tried to understand what kind of world she'd married into. It wasn't until dessert that things got interesting. I heard an interesting rumor, Antonio Greco said casually, swirling wine in his glass, that your marriage was somewhat arranged. To settle a debt? The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Victor's hand tightened on hers, still gentle, but communicating warning. You heard wrong, Victor said, voice pleasant and absolutely deadly. My marriage is my business, Antonio. I'd hate for you to spread misinformation that might embarrass you later. Of course, no offense intended. But Antonio's smile didn't reach his eyes. I only mention it because it reminded me of another marriage, 20 years ago, your father and, what was her name, Maria? Mara? Elena felt Victor go absolutely still beside her, the kind of stillness that came before violence. Mara, Victor said softly. Her name was Mara Castellano. That's right. Beautiful woman. Such a tragedy. What happened? Antonio's gaze slid to Elena. You know, Mrs. DeLuca, you remind me of her. Something about the eyes. The trap was sprung. Elena could see it clearly now. Antonio had known exactly who she resembled and had been waiting all through lunch to drop this bomb. The question was why. I wouldn't know, Elena said calmly. I never met her. No, of course not. You would have been just a baby when she died. Antonio leaned back, the picture of casual interest. Still, the resemblance is remarkable. Makes one wonder about bloodlines, family trees, connections that might not be immediately obvious. Careful, Antonio. Victor's voice could have cut glass. My wife's family is my business. Keep wondering about it, and you might find yourself wondering about things that get you hurt. No need for threats, Victor. I'm simply making conversation. Then make it about something else. The tension stretched like a wire about to snap. Marcus cleared his throat uncomfortably. Chenwei found something fascinating about his wine glass, and Elena sat perfectly still, waiting to see if this lunch meeting was about to turn into bloodshed. Finally, Antonio laughed, a forced, unpleasant sound. Of course. Forgive an old man's curiosity. He raised his glass. To new marriages and old mysteries. May they both end well. No one drank to that toast. The meeting ended shortly after, with polite goodbyes that didn't hide the underlying current of threat and counter-threat. Victor kept Elena close as they walked out, his hand firm on the small of her back, and she could feel the coiled tension in his body. They didn't speak until they were in the car, doors closed, privacy restored. That went well, Elena said dryly. Victor's laugh was sharp and humorless. Antonio Greco is a snake, always has been. He's testing boundaries, seeing how much he can push before I push back. Why does he care about Mara, or me? Because information is currency in this world. Victor pulled out his phone, started typing rapid messages. Antonio makes his money knowing things other people want kept secret. He's telling me that he knows about your connection to the Castellano family, and he's wondering what I'm willing to do to keep that quiet." Elena's stomach sank. "What are you willing to do?" Victor looked up from his phone, and the expression on his face was absolutely ruthless. "Whatever it takes to protect you. You're my wife, Elena. That means something in this world. That means no one touches you, threatens you, or uses you as leverage without answering to me. Even if I'm a liability? Even if my connection to the Castellanos makes your life more complicated? Especially then." He went back to his phone. "You didn't choose this marriage any more than I did, but we're in it now, and I protect what's mine." There was that word again. Mine. Like she was property, a possession. Something to be guarded not because she mattered, but because she belonged to him. Elena looked out the window at the city passing by. Her city, the place she'd grown up, now viewed through tinted glass from the back of a car that cost more than her parents' house. Everything looked different from this side. Smaller, more distant. "Victor?" She waited until he looked up. "Thank you for standing up for me back there. Don't thank me for doing the bare minimum." But his expression softened slightly. "You did well today. The marketing insights were smart. You held your own. I wasn't sure I would." "I was." Victor's gaze was steady. "You walked down that aisle yesterday knowing exactly what you were agreeing to. Anyone with that much courage can handle a room full of criminals pretending to be businessmen." It was the first real compliment he'd given her. The first indication that he saw her as more than just a ghost, or a problem, or a chess piece. Elena felt something warm unfold in her chest. Not love, nothing that dramatic, but maybe the beginning of respect. "What happens now?" she asked. Again. She seemed to be asking that question a lot lately. "Now we go home. I make some calls. You rest. Tonight, we'll have dinner together. Not because I'm testing you or showing you off, but because I think we need to talk, really talk, about what this marriage is going to look like going forward. And what do you think it should look like?" Victor was quiet for a moment, considering. "I think we're stuck with each other for the foreseeable future. I think you deserve better than being treated like a prisoner in my house. And I think," he paused, seemed to be choosing his words carefully, "I think you're not Mara. You're Elena. And maybe it's time I started seeing you that way." It was more than she'd hoped for, more than she'd expected from a man who'd looked at her yesterday and seen only a ghost. "I'd like that," Elena said softly. The rest of the drive passed in companionable silence. When they pulled through the gates of Victor's estate, Elena felt something shift, not quite acceptance, not quite comfort, but something less than the terror that had consumed her yesterday. Victor helped her out of the car, and his hand lingered on hers for just a moment longer than necessary. "Go rest. I'll see you at dinner. 7 o'clock. I'll be there." Elena went upstairs, kicked off the expensive shoes, and collapsed onto the bed. Her phone, a new one that had appeared on the nightstand this morning, buzzed with a text from her mother. "Just checking in." "Love you, baby," she texted back. "I'm okay, Mama. Really. Tell Papa I love him." Then she lay there, staring at the ceiling, and tried to process everything that had happened in the past 24 hours. Married to a stranger, tangled up in decades-old mysteries and murders, threatened by men in expensive suits over lunch, protected by a husband who wasn't sure if she was an asset or a threat. It was insane. All of it. But she was alive. Her family was safe. And for the first time since walking down that aisle, Elena thought she might actually survive this. She must have dozed off, because the next thing she knew, someone was knocking on her door, and the light coming through the windows had gone golden with late afternoon sun. "Mrs. DeLuca?" Mrs. Chen's voice. "Mr. DeLuca asked me to inform you that dinner will be ready in 30 minutes. He'll meet you in the small dining room." Elena dragged herself upright, went to splash water on her face. In the mirror, she looked rumpled, tired, human. Not a ghost, not a chess piece, just a woman trying to navigate impossible circumstances. She changed into something simpler, soft gray pants and a cream sweater, and made her way downstairs. The small dining room turned out to be a cozy space off the kitchen, windows overlooking the gardens, table set for two. Victor was already there, also changed into more casual clothes, and he looked younger somehow without the suit, more approachable. Elena, please. He gestured to the chair across from him. Dinner was simple: roasted chicken, vegetables, fresh bread. Nothing fancy, nothing showy. Just food, shared across a small table, and Elena realized this was the most normal thing she'd done since agreeing to this marriage. They ate in silence for a few minutes before Victor spoke. I owe you an apology. Elena looked up, surprised. For what? For yesterday. For looking at you and seeing someone else. For treating you like a mystery to be solved instead of a person. He set down his fork, met her eyes directly. You're right. You're not Mara. You're Elena. And regardless of your connection to the Castellano family, you're my wife, and you deserve to be treated with respect. Thank you. Elena's throat felt tight. I know this situation isn't what either of us wanted, but I'm trying, Victor. I'm trying to be what you need me to be. What if I told you I don't need you to be anything except yourself? The question hung between them. Elena studied his face, looking for the catch, the angle, the hidden trap, but all she saw was a man who looked as tired and confused as she felt. Then I'd say you barely know who I am, Elena said honestly. We're strangers who got married for all the wrong reasons. True. So let's fix that. Victor leaned back, considering. Tell me something real about yourself. Not your family history or your brother's debts, something that's just Elena. Elena thought about it. What did she have that was just hers? What parts of her existed separate from all the mess that had led her here? I wanted to be a teacher, she said finally. Before everything happened. I was taking classes at community college, working toward my degree. I wanted to teach elementary school, 2nd or 3rd grade, where kids are still excited about learning, still believe the world is good. Victor's expression softened. Why didn't you? Money, time. Marco's debt started piling up about 2 years ago, and I had to drop out to work more hours, help my parents keep up with everything. She smiled without humor. Guess that didn't work out so well. You could go back, Victor said. Finish your degree. I could arrange it. Why would you do that? Because you're my wife, and your happiness reflects on me. He paused. And because you should have something in your life that's yours, something that isn't about me or my world or the mess we're both stuck in. It was thoughtful, generous even, and it made Elena's chest ache with something complicated, gratitude and suspicion and a dangerous flicker of hope. I'll think about it, she said. They talked through the rest of dinner. Small things, safe things. Victor told her about growing up in this house, about his mother who died when he was young, about the pressure of taking over his father's empire at 28. Elena told him about her neighborhood, her friends, the small joys of a life that had been simple before it became complicated. By the time dessert appeared, tiramisu that melted on Elena's tongue, she realized she was actually enjoying herself, enjoying him. This version of Victor, who smiled occasionally and asked real questions and seemed genuinely interested in her answers. It was dangerous, that enjoyment. It would be too easy to forget that this was a business arrangement, that Victor had married her to settle a debt and solve a mystery, that whatever warmth existed between them now was built on a foundation of obligation and suspicion. But for one evening, Elena let herself pretend, let herself imagine that this was a real marriage, a real conversation, a real connection forming between two people who'd chosen each other. It was nice while it lasted. They were finishing coffee when Victor's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his entire demeanor changed, the relaxed man vanishing, replaced by the cold, controlled crime boss. I need to take this. He stood abruptly. Excuse me. He walked out into the hallway, and Elena heard his voice, sharp, commanding, speaking rapid Italian. She caught words here and there. Problem. Tonight. Handle it. When he came back, his face was carved from stone. I'm sorry. Something's come up that I need to deal with personally. Is everything all right? It will be. He moved toward the door, paused. Don't wait up. This might take a while. Victor? Elena stood, not sure what she wanted to say, but knowing she needed to say something. Be careful. He looked surprised, then something that might have been pleased flickered across his features. I will. Lock your door tonight, Elena, just as a precaution. Then he was gone, and Elena was alone in the small dining room with the remains of a meal that had felt almost normal for a few precious hours. She went upstairs, locked her door as instructed, and tried not to think about what kind of problem required Victor to leave in the middle of the night. Tried not to wonder if he'd come back. Tried not to care that she was starting to see him as more than just the man who owned her debt. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed midnight. Elena lay in bed, listening to the silence, and wondered what fresh hell tomorrow would bring. She didn't have to wait long to find out. The gunshots woke her at 3 a.m. Elena sat bolt upright in bed, heart hammering against her ribs, trying to convince herself she'd imagined it. But then she heard shouting, men's voices, harsh and urgent, and the distinctive crack of more gunfire, closer this time. She scrambled out of bed, instinct driving her toward the window even as logic screamed at her to hide. Through the curtains she could see lights blazing across the grounds, figures moving in the darkness, and the unmistakable muzzle flash of weapons being fired. Someone was attacking the house. Elena's hands shook as she grabbed her phone, but before she could decide who to call, her door burst open. She spun around, a scream caught in her throat, but it was Mrs. Chen who stood there, face pale but composed. Come with me, now. The older woman's voice left no room for argument. What's happening? No time. Move. Elena followed Mrs. Chen into the hallway, where 2 of Victor's men were waiting, both armed, both scanning the corridor with professional intensity. One of them, she recognized him from the church, the mountain with the scarred eyebrow, gestured toward the back staircase. This way, Mrs. DeLuca. Stay close. They moved quickly through the house, and Elena caught glimpses of chaos through windows. More armed men, both Victor's and others, engaged in what could only be described as a small war on the manicured lawns. Glass shattered somewhere below them. Someone screamed, the sound cut off abruptly. Where's Victor? Elena demanded as they descended the stairs. Handling it? The scarred man said tersely. Our job is to get you somewhere safe. They emerged into what looked like a wine cellar, but when Mrs. Chen pressed a hidden panel, part of the wall swung open to reveal a reinforced steel door. Beyond it was a room Elena never would have guessed existed. Concrete walls, minimal furniture, supplies stacked neatly on shelves. A panic room. Inside, Mrs. Chen ordered. Elena hesitated at the threshold. I'm not hiding while Victor's out there getting shot at. You're doing exactly that because that's what he ordered. The scarred man's voice was gentle but firm. Ma'am, you being safe is the only thing keeping the boss focused right now. Don't make his job harder. The logic was sound, even if Elena hated it. She stepped into the panic room and Mrs. Chen followed, the steel door swinging shut behind them with a solid thunk that spoke of serious engineering. What happened? Elena asked once they were sealed inside. Why is someone attacking us? Not us. You. Mrs. Chen moved to a bank of monitors on one wall, flicked them on to reveal security camera feeds from around the property. Mr. DeLuca received intelligence 2 hours ago that someone had put a contract out. He came back to secure the house, but they moved faster than expected. Elena's blood went cold. A contract? On me? On Victor DeLuca's new wife. Yes. Mrs. Chen's fingers flew over controls, switching between camera views. He's been expecting something like this since the wedding. The lunch with Antonio Greco accelerated the timeline. On the monitors, Elena could see the battle unfolding in grainy black and white. Victor's men had secured defensive positions, and the attackers, she counted at least 8, maybe more, were being systematically pushed back. It was brutal, efficient, and absolutely terrifying. Where's Victor? Elena scanned the feeds, looking for him. Mrs. Chen pointed to one screen. There, in the front courtyard, Victor moved with deadly precision. He wasn't hiding behind cover like his men. He was advancing, weapon raised, taking calculated shots that dropped attackers with frightening accuracy. Even through the low-quality feed, Elena could see the cold focus on his face, the complete absence of fear or hesitation. This was Victor DeLuca, the crime boss. Not the man who'd shared dinner with her hours ago, who'd asked about her dreams of teaching. This was the monster everyone feared, and he was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. "He's going to get himself killed," Elena whispered. "He's protecting his home, his wife." Mrs. Chen's voice held something that might have been approval. "Mr. DeLuca takes his responsibilities very seriously." They watched in tense silence as the fight continued. Victor's men were well-trained, well-armed, and fighting on familiar ground. The attackers, whoever they were, had clearly underestimated the level of security surrounding Victor's new bride. One by one, they fell or retreated, until finally the gunfire stopped and an eerie quiet settled over the estate. Elena held her breath, counting heartbeats, waiting for something else to happen. But the monitors showed only Victor's men securing the perimeter, checking bodies, sweeping the grounds for any stragglers. And Victor, standing in the middle of the courtyard, phone to his ear, giving orders with the same calm precision he'd used at lunch. "Is it over?" Elena asked. "For now." Mrs. Chen didn't look away from the screens. "But this was just the opening move. Whoever ordered this will try again." The steel door opened with a hydraulic hiss. Elena spun around to find the scarred man standing there, weapon lowered but still at the ready. "All clear, Mrs. DeLuca. Boss wants to see you." Elena's legs felt unsteady as she climbed back up to the main house, but she forced them to keep moving. The damage was worse than she'd glimpsed through the panic room monitors. Windows shattered, bullet holes in expensive walls, blood on the marble floors that someone was already working to clean. Victor ran a tight ship, even in crisis. She found him in his office, standing behind a massive desk, still holding the gun he'd used to defend their home. His white shirt was splattered with blood, whether his or someone else's, Elena couldn't tell, and there was a savage intensity to his expression that made her hesitate in the doorway. Then he looked up and saw her, and something cracked in that hard facade. "Elena." He set down the gun carefully, moved around the desk toward her. "Are you hurt?" "No, Mrs. Chen got me to the panic room. I'm fine." She searched his face, his body, looking for injuries. "Are you?" "Nothing serious." He gestured dismissively at a graze on his arm that was definitely serious enough to need attention. "You shouldn't be here. You should be resting." "Someone just tried to kill me, Victor. I'm not going to rest." Elena surprised herself with the steadiness of her voice. "Mrs. Chen said there's a contract out. On your wife, on me." Victor's jaw tightened. "Yes. Antonio Greco works fast when he wants to make a point." "You think he did this?" "I know he did. The men we captured are already talking." Victor's smile was absolutely savage. "Antonio wanted to test me, see if I'd sacrifice my new bride to avoid a war, or if I'd actually defend her. Now he has his answer." Elena's stomach churned. This was her fault. Her resemblance to Mara, her connection to the Castellano family, it had painted a target on her back and brought violence to Victor's door. "I should leave," she said quietly. "Go somewhere far away, somewhere that doesn't put you at risk." "No." The word was flat, absolute. Victor closed the distance between them, and Elena found herself backed against the doorframe, his hands braced on either side of her head, caging her in. "You're not going anywhere. You're my wife, Elena. That means something. That means I protect you, no matter what it costs." "Even if it costs you everything?" "Even then." His face was inches from hers, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes, the small scar on his cheekbone she'd never noticed before. "You didn't ask for this. Didn't ask to look like Mara. Didn't ask to carry Castellano blood. Didn't ask to marry me. But you're here now, and I'll be damned if I let Antonio Greco or anyone else use you as a pawn in their games." "I'm already a pawn, Victor. That's what this marriage made me." "No." His hand came up, cupped her face with surprising gentleness despite the violence still humming beneath his skin. "You were a pawn when you walked down that aisle, but you're something else now, something more. And I'm going to make sure everyone in this city understands that touching you means war with me." Elena's breath caught. There was something in his eyes that went beyond protection, beyond duty, something raw and fierce and possessive that made her pulse race for entirely different reasons than fear. Victor, whatever she'd been about to say was cut off by a commotion in the hallway. The scarred man appeared, expression grim. Boss, we've got a situation. One of the attackers is asking to speak with you, says he has information you'll want to hear. Victor's hand dropped from Elena's face. The moment shattered. About the contract? About who ordered it and why? The scarred man glanced at Elena. He's asking for protection in exchange for the information. Says there's more to this than just Antonio making a move. Elena watched the calculation happen behind Victor's eyes. The shift from the man who'd been standing too close, touching her too gently, back to the crime boss who dealt in information and violence with equal skill. Take him to the secure room. I'll be there in 5 minutes. Victor turned back to Elena. You should go back to your room. Lock the door. I'll come find you when this is done. I want to hear what he has to say. Elena, if someone's trying to kill me, I have a right to know why. She lifted her chin, met his gaze steadily. I'm not some fragile thing that needs to be protected from the truth, Victor. I'm already living in the middle of it. The least you can do is let me understand what's happening. For a moment, she thought he'd refuse, thought the protective instinct she'd seen in his eyes would override everything else. But then he nodded slowly. Stay close to me. Don't speak unless I tell you to. And if things get dangerous, you do exactly what I say. Understood? Understood. They walked through the damaged house together, Victor's hand a steady presence at the small of Elena's back. Staff members were everywhere, cleaning, repairing, erasing evidence of the attack with practiced efficiency. This wasn't the first time Victor's home had been targeted, Elena realized, and probably wouldn't be the last. The secure room turned out to be in the basement, windowless, soundproofed, with the kind of reinforced door that suggested whatever happened inside stayed inside. The scarred man stood guard outside, and when Victor opened the door, Elena saw what looked like an interrogation room. The captured attacker sat in a metal chair, hands zip-tied behind his back, face bloodied and swelling. He looked young, maybe 30, with the kind of desperate eyes that said he knew exactly how much trouble he was in. When Elena entered behind Victor, those desperate eyes widened. Jesus Christ, the man breathed. The rumors are true. You really do look exactly like her. Victor's hand tightened on Elena's back. Start talking. Who ordered the hit? And why? Antonio Greco. But he's working with someone else, someone who's been waiting 20 years for a chance to move against your family. The man's words came fast, tripping over each other in his haste to trade information for mercy. They wanted your wife dead to send you a message, that the past isn't buried as deep as you think. Who's Antonio working with? I don't know. Elena felt Victor go absolutely still beside her, the kind of stillness that preceded explosive violence. What old debts? Victor's voice was deadly calm. I don't know. They didn't say, but Antonio's contact said that the girl, he nodded toward Elena, shouldn't exist, that she's proof of something that was supposed to stay hidden. That's why she needs to die. Elena's blood ran cold. Proof of what? What secret could her existence possibly reveal? Victor moved closer to the captured man, crouched down to eye level. Think very carefully about your next answer. Is there anything else you heard? Anything about who this contact is, where they're from, what they want? The man shook his head frantically. I swear, that's all I know. I'm just muscle, man. They don't tell me the details. But I heard Antonio say that once the girl was dead, you'd have no choice but to negotiate. That you'd be vulnerable. Vulnerable? Victor laughed, and it was not a pleasant sound. Tell Antonio Greco that he's miscalculated badly. Tell him that every man who came here tonight and survived just signed his own death warrant. And tell him... Victor leaned in close, voice dropping to a whisper that Elena had to strain to hear. That if he or his mysterious contact comes near my wife again, I won't just kill him. I'll erase his entire bloodline from the earth. The threat hung in the air, absolute and terrifying in its simplicity. The captured man had gone pale, nodding frantically. I'll tell him. I swear I'll tell him exactly what you said. Good. Victor stood, gestured to the scarred man who'd followed them in. Marco, take our guest to a secure location. Keep him comfortable but contained. I may have more questions later. Yes, boss. As they left the secure room, Elena's mind raced. Proof of something, old debts, a secret that was supposed to stay hidden. What did it all mean? And what did it have to do with her resemblance to Mara? Back in Victor's office, she finally voiced the questions burning through her mind. What did he mean? I shouldn't exist. What secret could I possibly be proof of? Victor moved to a cabinet, pulled out a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. He poured generous amounts into both, handed one to Elena without asking if she wanted it. Drink, he ordered. You've earned it. Elena took the glass, let the burn of expensive whiskey steady her nerves. Answer my question, Victor. He was quiet for a long moment, staring into his own glass like it held answers he wasn't sure he wanted to find. There's a theory, he said finally, a rumor that's circulated for 20 years, never proven, never disproven, that Mara Castellano didn't die the night my father was killed. Elena's hand tightened on her glass. What do you mean? The blood in her car could have been planted. The whole scene could have been staged to make it look like she was killed along with my father. Victor's voice was carefully controlled, but Elena could hear the emotion beneath it. Some people believe she ran, that she was pregnant with my father's child and escaped before the assassins could find her. The world tilted. Elena set down her glass before she dropped it. You think I'm... No. Victor cut her off sharply. The timeline doesn't work. Mara disappeared 20 years ago. You're 26. If she'd been pregnant when she ran, her child would be 19 or 20 now, not 26. Then what? But if Mara had family, sisters, cousins, women who carried Castellano blood and the same distinctive features. Victor finally looked at her and his eyes were haunted. If one of them had a daughter, that daughter might look exactly like Mara, might be living proof that the Castellano bloodline survived when everyone thought it had been wiped out. Elena's mind spun, trying to process the implications. My mother. You think my mother was related to Mara? I think it's possible, more than possible. The resemblance is too perfect to be coincidence, Elena, and someone out there knows it, someone who thinks your existence threatens them somehow. But how? I'm nobody. I'm just a girl from the neighborhood who got caught up in her brother's mistakes. You're a DeLuca now. Victor's voice was firm. You carry my name, my protection, my resources. And if you're connected to the Castellano family, if you're proof that their bloodline survived, then you're a symbol. A threat to anyone who profited from their destruction 20 years ago. The weight of it crashed down on Elena. Not just fear for her own life, but the realization that she'd become a chess piece in a game that started before she was born. That her face, her blood, her very existence was a challenge to people who'd thought they'd won decades ago. What do we do? She whispered. We find out the truth. Victor set down his glass with controlled precision. Your mother. We need to talk to her. Get her to tell us everything about her family, about the Castellanos, about any connection to Mara. She'll never talk. She spent my whole life avoiding those questions. She'll talk to you, especially when you explain that her silence is getting you killed. Victor's expression softened slightly. I know this is hard, Elena. I know asking you to excavate your family's secrets feels like a betrayal, but we're out of options. Someone knows the truth, and they're willing to kill you to keep it buried. Our only defense is to dig it up first. Elena thought about her mother, small, worn down by life, carrying secrets that weighed her shoulders into a permanent hunch. Thought about forcing her to relive whatever trauma had made her flee her family name and build a new life under a different identity. But Victor was right. The truth was coming for them, whether they wanted it or not. Better to meet it head-on than let it ambush them in the dark. When? Elena asked. Tomorrow. After we've secured the house, dealt with the bodies, sent our message to Antonio Greco. Victor moved toward her, and this time when he cupped her face, the touch lingered. I'm sorry, Elena. Sorry that marrying me put you in danger. Sorry that your past is being weaponized against you. Sorry for all of it. It's not your fault. Isn't it? His thumb brushed her cheekbone. I could have refused the marriage. Could have found another way to settle your brother's debt. But I saw an opportunity, a transaction, a message, a simple solution to a simple problem. I didn't think about what it would cost you. Elena reached up, caught his hand before he could pull away. And if you'd refused, my brother would still owe you. My family would still be in danger. At least this way, I have your protection. I have a chance to fight back. You shouldn't have to fight. You should be in college, studying to be a teacher, living a normal life. Normal is overrated. Elena surprised herself with a small smile. And honestly, as terrifying as tonight was, there's something liberating about it too. For the first time in my life, I'm not helpless. I'm not just watching things happen to me. I'm in the middle of it, and I have choices, even if they're all terrible choices. Victor's expression was complicated. Surprise, respect, something that might have been admiration. You're remarkable, you know that? I'm terrified and pretending to be brave. That's what bravery is. He stepped back, let his hand fall. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be difficult, and you'll need your strength. What about you? I have calls to make, messages to send, a war to start. He said it casually, like declaring war was just another item on his to-do list. Don't worry about me, Elena. This is what I'm good at. Elena wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that he should rest too, that he'd been shot at and bled and fought for hours. But the set of his jaw told her it would be pointless. Victor DeLuca would sleep when his enemies were dead and his wife was safe, and not a moment before. Don't get yourself killed, she said instead. I'm just starting to like you. The smile that crossed his face was genuine and surprised and absolutely devastating. I'll do my best. Good night, Elena. Good night, Victor. She left him standing in his office, surrounded by monitors and weapons and the trappings of power, and made her way back to her room. The house was quieter now, the damage being methodically erased, order being restored, but nothing felt safe anymore. Nothing felt certain. Elena locked her door, climbed into bed, still wearing her clothes, and stared at the ceiling as dawn light began creeping through the curtains. Tomorrow, she'd confront her mother and dig up secrets that had stayed buried for 26 years. Tomorrow, she'd step deeper into the darkness of Victor's world and hope she could find her way back out. But tonight, she let herself feel the strange warmth of knowing that someone had fought for her, that Victor had looked at the choice between safety and protecting her, and he'd chosen her without hesitation. It didn't make them equals, didn't erase the debt or the arrangement or the fact that this marriage was built on obligation rather than love. But it was something, a foundation, maybe, something to build on if they both survived long enough. Elena closed her eyes and tried to sleep, knowing that the nightmares would come. They always did. But for once, they weren't nightmares about being helpless or alone. They were nightmares about losing something she was just beginning to realize she wanted to keep. The morning came too soon, pale light filtering through curtains that someone had repaired during the night. Elena dragged herself out of bed, showered away the lingering fear and adrenaline, and dressed in simple jeans and a sweater. If she was going to interrogate her mother about family secrets, she wasn't doing it in designer clothes. Victor was waiting in the kitchen, looking exhausted but alert, a cup of coffee in his hands and dark circles under his eyes that suggested he hadn't slept at all. "Ready?" he asked when she appeared. "No, but let's do it anyway." They drove to Elena's childhood home in silence, the city looking different in daylight after the violence of the previous night. Normal people going about normal lives, completely unaware that a small war had been fought in a mansion on the hill. Elena's mother opened the door on the second knock, and her face went through a cascade of emotions. Joy at seeing her daughter, fear at seeing Victor, confusion about why they were both standing on her doorstep at 9 in the morning. "Elena? What's wrong? Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Mama. Can we come in? We need to talk." They sat in the small living room where Elena had grown up, on furniture that had seen better days, surrounded by family photos and the comfortable clutter of a life lived paycheck to paycheck. Victor looked out of place in this world, too expensive and too dangerous, but he sat quietly and let Elena take the lead. "Mama, I need you to tell me about your family, your real family, the Castellanos." But Maria Russo went white. Actually white. All the blood draining from her face like someone had pulled a plug. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do." Elena kept her voice gentle but firm. "Someone tried to kill me last night, Mama. Someone who knows what you've been hiding, and the only way we can protect ourselves is if we understand the truth. Who? Maria's gaze darted to Victor. What have you done? What have you gotten my daughter into? Your daughter got herself into this the day she was born looking like Mara Castellano, Victor said quietly. Mrs. Russo, I know this is difficult, but Elena's right. We need the truth. All of it. Maria's hands twisted in her lap, and for a long moment Elena thought she'd refuse, thought the walls her mother had built around the past would hold. But then tears started sliding down weathered cheeks, and Maria's shoulders sagged like she'd been carrying this weight for 26 years and was finally being allowed to set it down. Mara was my cousin, she whispered, my father's brother's daughter. We grew up together, close as sisters. When she fell in love with Luca de Luca, the family went crazy. Said she was betraying them, sleeping with the enemy, choosing a man over blood. Victor leaned forward, every muscle tense. What happened? They killed him. My uncles, my father, they planned it together. Killed Luca de Luca to break Mara's heart and send a message to anyone who thought they could make peace between our families. Maria's voice cracked. But it went wrong. The men they hired killed Luca, but they couldn't find Mara. She'd gone into hiding, terrified, knowing they'd kill her too for loving the wrong man. Elena's chest felt tight. Did she survive? I don't know. Maria wiped at her eyes. I helped her disappear that night, got her money, a car, sent her as far away as I could. She was 6 weeks pregnant with Luca's baby, scared out of her mind, bleeding from a wound she'd gotten trying to protect him. I put her in that car, and I never saw her again. The room fell silent except for Maria's quiet crying. Elena tried to process it all, her mother, helping a cousin escape. A baby, possibly Victor's half-sibling, lost to history. Violence and betrayal woven through her family tree like poison roots. The blood in the car, Victor said hoarsely. Was it hers, but not fatal? We staged it to look like she'd been killed, bought her time to run. Maria finally looked at him directly. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what my family did to yours, for what they took from you. Victor's face was carved from stone, but Elena could see the grief in his eyes. The confirmation that his father had been murdered by the family of the woman he loved. That somewhere out there, he might have a half-sibling he'd never known about. Why didn't you ever tell me? Elena asked. Why keep it secret all these years? Because I was terrified. Maria reached for her daughter's hand. After that night, I ran too. Changed my name, married your father, tried to build a life as far from the Castellanos as I could get. I thought if I never spoke about it, never acknowledged the connection, you'd be safe. You'd be normal. She laughed bitterly. But you have her face, mija, Mara's face. I saw it the day you were born, and I knew that someday the past would come for you anyway. Elena squeezed her mother's hand, felt the trembling in those worn fingers. It's not your fault, Mama. None of this is your fault. Isn't it? Maria turned to Victor. If I'd spoken up sooner, if I'd told you what really happened, maybe we could have avoided all this. Maybe? Victor's voice was rough. Or maybe it would have gotten you all killed 20 years ago instead of now. He stood, moved to the window, shoulders rigid. Do you know if Mara survived? If the baby survived? I don't know. She was supposed to contact me once she was safe, let me know she'd made it, but I never heard from her again. Maria's voice dropped to a whisper. I like to think she made it, that she had Luca's baby and raised them somewhere far away from all this. But I don't know. Victor pulled out his phone, made a call in rapid Italian. Elena caught enough to understand he was ordering people to search for any trace of Mara Castellano, any records of a woman matching her description, any births around the right time frame. We'll find out, he said when he hung up. One way or another, we'll know what happened to her. And then what? Maria asked. What happens to Elena? To my family? That depends on who's been trying to kill your daughter. Victor's expression hardened. Mrs. Russo, do you know who else knew about Mara? Who else might have helped plan your father and uncle's scheme? Maria thought for a moment. There was another man, not family, but close to my father. Antonio something. He was always around, always whispering with my uncles about business and territory. Victor's eyes went cold. Antonio Greco? Yes, That sounds right. You know him? Unfortunately, Victor looked at Elena. That confirms it. Antonio was involved in my father's murder, and he's been sitting across negotiating tables from me for years, pretending to be an ally. The implications crashed over Elena like a wave. Antonio Greco hadn't just threatened her at lunch, he'd killed Victor's father. Had probably been planning Victor's downfall for 20 years, waiting for the right moment to strike. And Elena's existence, her resemblance to Mara, had provided that moment. "What are you going to do?" Elena asked quietly. Victor's smile was absolutely savage. "I'm going to do what I should have done years ago. I'm going to end Antonio Greco and everyone who helped him, and then I'm going to find out what happened to Mara and make sure her memory gets the justice my father never did." It was a declaration of war wrapped in a promise of vengeance. Elena should have been terrified, should have begged him to find another way, a peaceful solution. Instead, she stood and moved to his side. "Then I'm coming with you." "Elena, not to the actual fighting," she clarified, "but to whatever comes next. This is my family's mess as much as yours, Victor. My mother's cousin, my relatives who committed murder. I don't get to hide from that just because it's dangerous." Victor studied her face, searching for something. Whatever he found must have satisfied him, because he nodded slowly. "All right, but you do exactly what I say, when I say it. No arguments, no hesitation. Can you handle that?" "Yes." "Then we have work to do." Victor turned to Maria. "Mrs. Russo, I'm sending men to protect you and your husband until this is over. They'll be discreet, but they'll be there. And if Marco shows up—" "He's in hiding," Maria said quietly. "Has been since the wedding. He's ashamed of what he did." "He should be, but tell him that once this is settled, he and I will have a conversation about responsibility and consequences. He owes his sister more than he can ever repay." They left Maria sitting in the living room, still crying quietly, still carrying the weight of secrets that had finally been spoken aloud. As they drove back toward Victor's estate, Elena felt something shift inside her. Not acceptance exactly, but understanding. The pieces were falling into place, the mystery revealing its shape. She was Mara Castellano's cousin, one generation removed. She carried the same blood, the same features, the same legacy of violence and betrayal. And that made her dangerous to anyone who'd profited from the Castellano family's destruction. "Victor?" Elena broke the silence. "When you find Antonio Greco, what are you going to do to him?" "What he did to my father." Victor's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "What he tried to do to you. I'm going to erase him and his entire operation from this city." "And if Mara's still alive? If your father's child exists somewhere?" Victor was quiet for a long moment. "Then I'll find them. Bring them home if they want to come. Give them a choice my father never got to make." They drove the rest of the way in silence, and Elena watched the city pass by outside her window. Somewhere out there, answers waited. The truth about Mara, about the baby, about who'd really orchestrated the murders 20 years ago. And somewhere out there, Antonio Greco was planning his next move, unaware that the game had just changed. That the ghost he'd tried to bury had come back wearing Elena's face, and this time, she had Victor De Luca standing beside her. The war was coming. Elena could feel it in the air, in the tension radiating from Victor, in the way his men moved with lethal purpose when they pulled through the estate gates. But for the first time since walking down that aisle in a wedding dress, Elena wasn't afraid. She was ready. The war Victor promised came swiftly and without mercy. Elena watched it unfold from the safety of the estate, but Victor made sure she understood every move, every consequence. He'd meant what he said about not hiding the truth from her anymore. Every morning over coffee, he briefed her like she was part of his inner circle, which shipments had been intercepted, which of Antonio's businesses had mysteriously burned down, which allies had quietly switched sides when they realized Victor De Luca was done playing politics and had moved straight to annihilation. 3 of Antonio's warehouses are gone, Victor said on the 4th morning, spreading photographs across the breakfast table, like they were discussing vacation plans instead of arson. His cash flow is crippled. He's bleeding money and manpower, and his partners are getting nervous. Elena studied the images. Burned buildings, police tape, News headlines about accidental fires and unrelated explosions. How many people died? None. I gave them time to evacuate. Victor's voice was matter of fact. I'm not interested in killing warehouse workers who are just trying to feed their families, but Antonio's infrastructure? That's fair game. It was a strange kind of morality. Surgical strikes that destroyed property but spared lives when possible. Elena was learning that Victor operated by a code most people wouldn't understand. Ruthless, yes, but not needlessly cruel. Every action calculated, every consequence weighed. What about Antonio himself? Elena asked. Where is he? In hiding. Smart enough to know I'm coming for him, not smart enough to leave the city. Victor's smile was cold. He still thinks he can negotiate his way out of this, thinks that if he can just get me to the table, he can make me an offer I won't refuse. Can he? No. The word was absolute. 20 years ago, he helped murder my father. Last week, he tried to murder my wife. There's no negotiation after that. There's only justice. Justice. Victor used the word like it meant something different in his world. Not the kind handed down by judges and juries, but the kind written in blood and settled with finality. Elena should have been horrified, should have been disgusted by the violence, by the casual way Victor discussed destroying another man's life. But instead, she felt something fierce and hot burning in her chest. Antonio Greco had looked at her across a lunch table and decided she needed to die, had sent men to kill her in the middle of the night, had threatened everything she cared about. Victor was giving him exactly what he deserved. When will you move against him directly? Elena asked. Victor looked up from the photographs, studying her with those dark, intense eyes. Soon. We're closing the net, cutting off his escape routes, making sure that when we strike, it's final. He paused. Why? Are you anxious for this to be over? I'm anxious for you to be safe. The admission surprised her with its honesty. Every day this goes on is another day someone could get to you. Antonio's desperate, and desperate men do stupid things. Something shifted in Victor's expression. Surprise, maybe, or pleasure. Worried about me, Elena. Don't let it go to your head. But she couldn't quite hide the small smile. You're growing on me, that's all. I'd prefer not to be widowed before our first anniversary. Victor's laugh was genuine, warm. Fair enough. I'll do my best to stay alive then. The moment was broken by Marco, the scarred bodyguard, entering with a tablet in his hands and an expression that said the news wasn't good. Boss, we've got something. You need to see this. Victor took the tablet, and Elena watched his face go absolutely still as he read whatever was on the screen. That dangerous stillness that preceded violence. What is it? Elena asked. No. We found Mara. Victor's voice was hollow. Or rather, we found what happened to her. Elena's heart clenched. Is she dead? Has been for 19 years. Victor set down the tablet carefully, like he was afraid he might break it. She made it 6 months after fleeing, long enough to have the baby, long enough to try to build a new life. Then someone found her. The weight of it settled over the room like a shroud. Elena thought about her mother's cousin, young, pregnant, terrified, running for her life. 6 months of freedom before the past caught up to her. The baby? Elena asked quietly. Survived, a boy. He was found next to her body, crying but unharmed. Victor's jaw tightened. Child Services took him, put him in the system under a new name. No one made the connection to my father or the DeLuca family. Where is he now? Victor looked at her, and there was such raw grief in his eyes that Elena's chest ached. Dead. Killed in a car accident 5 years ago. 21 years old, working as a mechanic, completely unaware that he was Luca DeLuca's son. Elena stood, moved to Victor's side, put her hand on his shoulder. She didn't have words for this kind of loss. The brother he never got to meet, the family stolen by violence and circumstance. I'm sorry, she whispered. Don't be. I never knew him. Can't miss what I never had. But Victor's voice cracked around the edges, betraying the lie. His name was David Chen. He liked motorcycles and classic rock. Had a girlfriend who said he was the kindest man she'd ever met, died instantly when a drunk driver ran a red light. The mundane tragedy of it made it worse somehow. Not killed by the violence that had claimed his parents, but by random chance. A life that should have been extraordinary, reduced to a statistic. Who killed Mara? Elena asked. That's the interesting part. Victor pulled up another file on the tablet. According to the police report, it was a mugging gone wrong. She was shot in an alley behind her apartment, wallet and jewelry taken. Case went cold within weeks. You don't believe it was random, do you? Victor's eyes were hard. Mara survived the men who killed my father, stayed hidden for 6 months, had a baby, was careful enough not to be found. Then suddenly she's killed in a random mugging? No. Someone found her. Someone who wanted to make sure Luca De Luca's legacy died with her. Antonio Greco. Probably. Or someone working for him. Victor stood, began pacing. But here's what doesn't make sense. If Antonio wanted to eliminate any trace of Mara, why didn't he kill the baby too? Why leave a witness, even if David was just an infant? Elena thought about it. Maybe he didn't know about the baby until after. Maybe Mara hid the pregnancy well, and by the time Antonio's people found her, she'd already given birth and left David somewhere safe. Possible. Or maybe whoever killed her had a shred of conscience left and couldn't bring themselves to murder an infant. Victor's voice was bitter. Not that it matters now. They're all dead. Mara, David, my father. The whole tragedy played out to its conclusion while I was oblivious. Not the whole tragedy. Elena caught his arm, made him look at her. You're still here. I'm still here. And we know the truth now. That has to count for something. Does it? Knowing the truth doesn't bring them back. Doesn't give David the life he deserved, growing up as a De Luca instead of an orphan in the foster system. Victor's control was fracturing, grief and rage bleeding through. I could have found him, Elena. If I'd looked harder, dug deeper, refused to accept that Mara was just another casualty, I could have found my brother and given him a family. You didn't know he existed. I should have known. The words exploded out of him. My father loved her enough to defy every rule, every tradition. I should have questioned the official story, should have kept searching. Instead, I buried my grief and moved on like a good soldier, and David lived and died alone. Elena understood then. This wasn't just about losing a brother he'd never met. This was about Victor's rigid control, his need to manage and protect and solve every problem. The one time he'd accepted defeat, accepted that some mysteries couldn't be solved, it had cost him family he didn't even know he had. Victor, look at me. She waited until his eyes met hers. You were 17 when your father died. 17 years old, thrust into running a criminal empire, surrounded by people who wanted you dead or wanted to use you. You didn't fail David. The world failed him, the same world that killed your father and Mara and tried to erase their love like it never existed. That doesn't make it hurt less. No, but it does mean you're not responsible for fixing what was already broken before you had the power to change it. Elena's voice softened. What you can do is make sure it doesn't happen again. Make sure Antonio pays for what he did. Make sure Mara and David's story gets told, gets remembered. Victor pulled her into his arms so suddenly that Elena gasped. He held her tight, face buried in her hair, and she could feel the tremors running through his body. This man who was always controlled, always composed, finally letting himself break. Elena wrapped her arms around him and held on, held him while he grieved for the family he'd lost, the brother he'd never known, the future that had been stolen before it could begin. She didn't offer platitudes or false comfort, just her presence, solid and real, anchoring him while the storm passed. Finally, Victor pulled back and his eyes were red-rimmed but clear. Thank you. For what? For seeing me. Not the boss, not the monster everyone fears. Just me. He cupped her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. You're the first person in a very long time who's looked at me and seen something worth caring about. Elena's breath caught. There was something in his gaze that went beyond gratitude, beyond the fragile alliance they'd built, something deeper and more dangerous. Victor. His phone buzzed, shattering the moment. Victor released her with visible reluctance, glanced at the screen, and his expression hardened back into the crime boss everyone knew. It's time, he said. Antonio's agreed to meet. Neutral ground. Just him and 2 bodyguards tomorrow at midnight. It's a trap. Undoubtedly, but I don't care. This ends tomorrow, one way or another. Victor's eyes were cold again, all the vulnerability locked away behind walls of steel. He wants to negotiate. I'll let him talk while I decide exactly how he's going to die. Elena should have tried to talk him out of it, should have suggested alternatives, urged caution, begged him to find a safer way. But she understood now. This wasn't about safety. This was about justice for Victor's father, for Mara, for David, for every life Antonio Greco had destroyed in his climb to power. I want to be there, Elena said. Absolutely not. Victor. No, Elena. This is where I draw the line. Victor's voice was firm. You've been brave, you've been strong, you've handled things that would have broken most people. But I will not bring you to a meeting with the man who tried to have you killed. I will not risk you becoming collateral damage if things go wrong. Then don't let things go wrong. I can't guarantee that. This is Antonio Greco we're talking about. He survived 30 years in this business by being smarter, more ruthless, more willing to do terrible things than his competitors. Walking into a meeting with him is dangerous even for me. Which is exactly why you need someone watching your back who isn't on his payroll. Elena crossed her arms. How do you know your own men haven't been compromised? How do you know Antonio hasn't bought someone close to you? Victor's expression said he'd already considered this. I trust Marco with my life, have for 10 years. And the others? The pause was telling. Victor trusted his inner circle, but absolute certainty? That was harder to come by in a world where loyalty could be bought and betrayal was a business strategy. I'll have precautions in place, Victor said finally. Multiple teams, overlapping surveillance, backup plans for the backup plans. But you're still not coming. Fine. Elena knew when to push and when to retreat. But I want to know exactly where you'll be and when. And if you're not back by 1 a.m., I'm calling in every favor, every contact, every resource I can think of to find you. Victor's smile was small but genuine. Deal. Though I'm curious what resources you think you have. You'd be surprised what a girl can accomplish when she's motivated. Elena moved closer, straightened his collar, even though it didn't need straightening. Come back to me, Victor. We have unfinished business. Oh? What kind of business? Elena surprised herself by going up on her toes and kissing him. Just a brief press of lips, nothing dramatic, but enough to make her point. The kind that requires both of us alive to finish. Victor's eyes darkened. Elena, tomorrow, she said, stepping back before she could do something stupid like deepen the kiss. After you've dealt with Antonio and we're both still breathing, we'll figure out what this is. But for now, focus on staying alive. When did you get so bossy? I married you, didn't I? Had to develop some survival skills. Victor laughed, pulled her back in for another kiss. Deeper this time, more urgent, tasting like coffee and determination and promises neither of them was quite ready to speak out loud. When he finally released her, they were both breathing hard. I'll come back, he said firmly. I promise. You better. I'm just starting to like having you around. The next 24 hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Elena tried to distract herself with books, with phone calls to her parents, with anything that would keep her mind off what was coming. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Victor walking into a trap, saw Antonio Greco's smug face, saw the dozens of ways this could all go catastrophically wrong. Mrs. Chen found her pacing the library at 10 p.m., wearing a path in the expensive rug. You should rest, Mrs. DeLuca. Worrying won't change anything. I know, but I can't seem to stop. Elena glanced at the older woman. How do you do it? How do you watch him walk into danger and just accept it? I don't accept it. I hate it every single time. Mrs. Chen's voice was soft. But Mr. DeLuca is who he is. This world chose him before he was old enough to choose differently. All we can do is make sure he has a home to come back to when the fighting's done. Is that enough? Just waiting and hoping? Sometimes hoping is the bravest thing we can do. Mrs. Chen moved to the window, looked out at the gardens. He's different with you, you know, softer, more willing to let someone see beneath the armor. We barely know each other. Time isn't the only measure of connection. Sometimes two people just fit, and it doesn't matter if they've known each other for years or days. Mrs. Chen smiled. He cares about you, Mrs. DeLuca. Maybe more than he's ready to admit. That's worth fighting for. Elena thought about the way Victor had held her this morning, the grief he'd let her see, the kiss that had felt like a promise. Yeah, it is. At 11:30, Victor came downstairs dressed in black tactical gear, looking every inch the dangerous man he was. Marco and 3 other men flanked him, all similarly dressed, all carrying enough weapons to start a small war. Last chance to wish me luck, Victor said, finding Elena in the foyer. She threw her arms around him, held tight. Don't do anything stupid. Don't take unnecessary risks, and if he offers you a drink, for the love of everything, don't accept it. Yes, ma'am. Victor kissed the top of her head. I'll be back before you know it. Try to get some sleep. Not a chance. Didn't think so. He pulled back, studied her face like he was memorizing it. Elena, if something does go wrong, it won't. But if it does, there are instructions in my office, papers, accounts, everything you'd need. You'd be taken care of, protected. I don't want your money, Victor. I want you to come back. I know, but just in case... Elena cut him off with a kiss that was probably inappropriate in front of his men, but she didn't care. Come back to me. That's the only instruction I need. Victor's smile was fierce. Yes, ma'am. Then he was gone, disappearing into the night with his men, and Elena was left standing in the foyer with her heart hammering and her hands shaking. She went to Victor's office, not to look at the instructions he'd mentioned, but because it felt closer to him somehow. Surrounded by his things, his scent lingering in the air, she could almost pretend he was just in the next room instead of walking into danger. Mrs. Chen brought tea at midnight. Elena didn't drink it, just wrapped her hands around the warm cup and watched the clock tick toward 1 a.m. 12:15, 12:30, 12:45. By 1 a.m., Elena was ready to start making good on her threat to mobilize every resource she could think of. She had her phone in her hand, trying to decide who to call first when she heard it. Gunshots. Distant but unmistakable, coming from somewhere beyond the estate walls. Elena's blood turned to ice. She ran to the window, but the grounds were quiet, peaceful, giving no indication of the violence happening somewhere in the city. More gunshots, closer this time. Then the roar of car engines, headlights sweeping through the gates. Mrs. Chen burst into the office. Mrs. DeLuca, we need to get you to the safe room now. What's happening? Is Victor... I don't know, but we have multiple vehicles approaching fast, and I'm not taking any chances with your safety. Elena let herself be hustled toward the panic room, but every instinct screamed at her to stay, to wait, to know what was happening. The cars were pulling up to the house now, doors slamming, voices shouting. Then she heard it, Victor's voice, loud and commanding, giving orders. He was alive. Elena broke away from Mrs. Chen, ran back toward the front of the house. She emerged into the foyer just as Victor strode through the door, and the sight of him made her knees weak with relief. He was covered in blood, whose she couldn't tell, and there was a savage light in his eyes that said the meeting with Antonio had gone exactly as planned. Behind him, Marco and the others were hauling someone in, a man with a bag over his head, hands bound behind his back. Victor! Elena ran to him, and he caught her with one arm, held her tight against his side. I'm fine. It's not my blood. His voice was hard, adrenaline still pumping. Well, not most of it. What happened? Antonio tried to double-cross me. Had snipers positioned, twice as many men as agreed. Thought he could kill me and end this war before it really started. Victor's smile was absolutely feral. He thought wrong. The bound man was forced to his knees in the middle of the foyer. Victor nodded to Marco, who yanked off the hood. Antonio Greco looked nothing like the polished businessman who'd threatened Elena over lunch. He was disheveled, bleeding from a cut above his eye, and absolutely terrified. Victor, please. We can talk about this. Make a deal. No deals. Victor released Elena, moved to stand over Antonio. 20 years ago you helped murder my father. You orchestrated the death of Mara Castellano and tried to erase their son from existence. Last week you put a contract out on my wife. There's nothing to negotiate, Antonio. This is just you facing consequences. It wasn't my idea. Antonio's composure cracked completely. The Castellano brothers. They planned it. I just helped execute the plan. I was following orders. You were profiting from murder. Don't pretend you were just a soldier. The victor crouched down, got eye level with the man who'd haunted his family for 2 decades. You know what the worst part is? If you just stayed in your lane, focused on your own operations, I might never have connected the dots. But you couldn't resist. You saw Elena, saw Mara's face staring back at you, and you panicked, made it personal. She's dangerous. She's proof that the Castellano line survived, that Mara had family. She's my wife. That's all that matters. Victor stood. Marco, take him to the secure location. I'll deal with him tomorrow when I've had time to decide exactly how much suffering he's earned. As Antonio was dragged away, still pleading and bargaining, Victor finally seemed to see Elena standing there, watching the whole scene with wide eyes. I'm sorry you had to see that, he said quietly. I'm not. Elena moved closer. Is it over? Really over? This part is. We still have cleanup to do. Antonio's organization won't collapse overnight, and there are still people out there who might try to avenge him, but the immediate threat is handled. Victor reached for her, seemed to remember the blood on his hands, and pulled back. I should clean up before I touch you. I don't care about the blood. Elena closed the distance between them, took his face in her hands. You came back. That's all that matters. I promised I would. You did. Elena kissed him, tasting copper and adrenaline and relief. Don't make me wait that long again. Victor's laugh was shaky. Yes, ma'am. Though I make no promises about the dangerous situations. Kind of comes with the territory. Then I guess I'll have to get used to it. Elena rested her forehead against his. We're really doing this, aren't we? Making this marriage real? Do you want to? Elena thought about everything that had happened since she'd walked down that aisle. The fear, the violence, the revelations about her family. Thought about Victor's grief and his strength, the way he protected her without making her feel weak, the way he'd let her see beneath his armor. Yeah, she said softly. I think I do. Even knowing what my life is like, the danger, the violence, the constant threat, even knowing all that. Because you're worth it, Victor. This, she gestured between them, is worth it. Victor kissed her again, deeper this time, and Elena felt something shift. The marriage that had started as a transaction, born from debt and desperation, was transforming into something real. Something chosen. When they finally pulled apart, Victor was smiling. A real smile. Not the cold calculation he showed the world, but genuine happiness. Come on, he said, taking her hand. Let me clean up, and then we'll talk. Really talk. About what happens next. What does happen next? Whatever we want. For the first time since my father died, I actually have a choice about my future. About our future. Victor's eyes were warm. And I choose you, Elena, if you'll have me. Elena squeezed his hand. I already married you once. Might as well make it count. They walked upstairs together, leaving the blood and violence and fear behind. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, new battles to fight. But for tonight, they had each other, and that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The water in Victor's shower ran red for a long time, washing away blood and violence until only the man remained. Elena sat on the edge of his bed, still dressed, listening to the sound and trying to process everything that had happened in the past hour. Antonio Greco was downstairs, captured and broken. The war was over. Victor had come back to her, just like he'd promised. And she'd told him she wanted this marriage to be real. The admission should have terrified her, should have sent her running back to her own room, back to the safety of emotional distance. Instead, she felt calm. Certain. Like she'd finally stopped fighting against the current and let herself be carried towards something that had been inevitable from the moment Victor lifted her veil. The shower cut off. A moment later, Victor emerged wearing only black pants, his torso bare and revealing the full extent of the damage. Bruises were already blooming across his ribs, and there was a bandage on his shoulder that suggested a bullet had come too close. You're hurt, Elena said, standing. Barely. I've had worse. But he winced when he reached for his shirt. Let me. Elena took the shirt from him, helped guide his arms through the sleeves with gentle care. You need to see a doctor. I have someone on call. He'll be here in the morning to check everything. Victor caught her hands before she could button the shirt, held them against his chest. Thank you for waiting up, for caring. Where else would I be? I don't know. Most people in your position would be planning their escape, figuring out how to get away from the monster they married. His voice was careful, like he was afraid of her answer. Elena looked up at him, at the man who'd fought his way back to her through bullets and betrayal. You're not a monster, Victor. You're just a man trying to survive in an impossible world. And you're my husband. For real this time. Not because of debt or obligation, but because I choose you. Victor's expression cracked, vulnerability bleeding through. I don't deserve you. Probably not. But you've got me anyway. Elena reached up, traced the scar on his cheekbone. We're both broken people, Victor. Both carrying damage from the lives we didn't choose. Maybe that's exactly why this works. He kissed her then, slow and deep, tasting like mint and desperation. Elena melted into it, into him, feeling the last walls between them crumble. When they finally broke apart, Victor rested his forehead against hers. Stay, he whispered. Tonight. Don't go back to your room. Stay with me. It wasn't about sex, Elena understood. It was about not being alone, about having someone beside him when the adrenaline faded and the reality of what he'd done, what he'd survived, came crashing down. Okay, she said simply. They lay down together on Victor's bed, still mostly clothed, wrapped in each other's arms. Elena listened to his heartbeat gradually slow from the frantic pace of combat to something steadier, more human. Felt his breathing even out as exhaustion finally claimed him. She should have been tired too, should have been falling asleep beside him. Instead, she lay awake, watching the shadows move across the ceiling, thinking about everything that had brought them to this moment. A wedding she hadn't wanted, a resemblance that had nearly gotten her killed, a husband who'd looked at her and seen a ghost, then slowly learned to see the woman instead. It was messy and complicated and built on a foundation of violence, but it was real. More real than anything Elena had experienced in her careful, controlled life before Marco's debts had blown everything apart. I can hear you thinking, Victor murmured against her hair. What's going on in that brilliant mind? Just trying to figure out how we got here. From strangers at an altar to this. Shared trauma has a way of accelerating intimacy. Victor's voice was drowsy but thoughtful, though I'd like to think it's more than just surviving danger together. It is. You're arrogant and controlling, and you make decisions without consulting anyone. Elena felt him tense, started to smile. But you're also protective and loyal, and you actually listen when I talk. You see me, Victor, not as property or a chess piece, but as a person. That's more than I expected from this marriage. You set a very low bar. You married me to settle a debt and solve a mystery. The bar was practically underground. Elena shifted to look at him. But you've exceeded it. Every day in ways I didn't think were possible. So yeah, I choose this. I choose you. Even knowing what it means. Victor's hand came up to cup her face. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that choice. Just don't die trying. I've gotten attached to you. Attached? That's one way to put it. Victor's smile was soft. I think I'm falling in love with you, Elena. Which is probably the stupidest thing I've ever admitted, given we've known each other less than 2 weeks. Elena's heart stuttered. Love. The word hung between them, huge and terrifying and impossibly fragile. That is stupid. I know. Completely irrational. Agreed. We barely know each other. True. And I think I'm falling in love with you too, Elena whispered. Victor's smile was brilliant, transforming his face from dangerous to beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. Against all logic and common sense. You're under my skin, Victor DeLuca. I think you have been since you lifted that veil and looked at me like I'd shattered your world. You did shatter it. Then you helped me build something better from the pieces. Victor kissed her again, sweet and tender. Get some sleep, wife. Tomorrow's going to be complicated. When isn't it complicated? Fair point. Elena settled against his chest, let the steady rhythm of his breathing lull her toward sleep. Just before she drifted off, she felt Victor's arms tighten around her, heard him whisper something in Italian that sounded like a prayer or a promise. She was safe. She was home. And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, she was happy. Morning came with pale sunlight and the sound of voices downstairs. Elena woke alone in Victor's bed, sheets still warm where he'd been lying beside her. A note on the pillow read, "Dealing with Antonio. Back soon. Don't worry. Like that was an option." Elena showered in Victor's bathroom, borrowed one of his shirts because it smelled like him and made her feel less alone, and went downstairs to find Mrs. Chen coordinating what looked like an entire construction crew. "What's all this?" Elena asked. "Repairs, Mrs. DeLuca. Mr. DeLuca wants all evidence of the attack erased by tonight." Mrs. Chen handed Elena a cup of coffee. "He also asked me to tell you that he'll be back by noon, and that you shouldn't go anywhere without Marco." Right on cue, the scarred bodyguard appeared. "Morning, Mrs. DeLuca. I'm your shadow today." Lucky me. But Elena smiled to take the sting out of it. "Where's Victor?" "Finishing business with Antonio Greco. Should be done soon." Elena knew what finishing business meant in Victor's world. Part of her wanted to ask for details, wanted to know exactly what was happening to the man who'd tried to have her killed. But a bigger part of her recognized that some things were better left unknown. She spent the morning wandering the estate with Marco trailing behind her, watching workers replace windows and patch bullet holes with impressive efficiency. By noon, most of the visible damage was gone, erased like the attack had never happened. Victor returned at 12:15, looking tired but satisfied. "It's done." Elena met him in the foyer, searched his face for guilt or regret, found only grim determination and the bone-deep exhaustion of a man who'd done something terrible but necessary. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I will be." Victor pulled her into his arms, held tight. Antonio talked before the end, gave up names, connections, everyone who'd been involved in my father's murder. We'll spend the next few weeks cleaning house, making sure none of his associates get ideas about revenge. And then? And then we figure out what our life looks like. The real one, not the one built on survival and vengeance. Victor pulled back to look at her. "I want to take you somewhere. Away from the city, away from all this. Just for a few days. Would you come with me?" "Where?" "Does it matter?" Elena thought about it. Did it matter where they went, as long as they went together? As long as they had time to figure out this fragile new thing between them without bullets and blood getting in the way? "No," she said. "It doesn't matter. I'll go anywhere with you." 3 days later, they were on a plane to somewhere Victor refused to name. Elena sat beside him, watching clouds drift past the window, and tried to remember the last time she'd been on a plane. High school, maybe? A field trip to Washington, D.C. that her parents had scraped together money for. This was different. Private jet, leather seats, a level of luxury that still made her uncomfortable even after living in Victor's mansion. "Where are we going?" she asked for the 100th time. "You'll see." Victor was relaxed in a way she'd never seen him, dressed in jeans and a simple black shirt, looking more like a normal man than a crime boss. They landed 6 hours later on a small island Elena didn't recognize. Turquoise water, white sand beaches, palm trees swaying in gentle wind. Paradise, basically. "Victor, where are we?" "Private island. Belongs to a friend who owed me a favor. We have it completely to ourselves for the next week." Victor led her off the plane toward a villa that sat on a cliff overlooking the ocean. No bodyguards, no business calls, no violence. Just us. The villa was beautiful, open and airy, decorated in whites and blues with floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the incredible view. Elena walked through it in a daze, touching expensive furniture and wondering if this was real. "I don't understand," she said finally. "Why are we here?" "Because you deserve a honeymoon. A real one, not the nightmare I gave you the first time." Victor came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. "Because I want time with my wife that isn't colored by fear or obligation. Because I'm falling in love with you, Elena, and I want the chance to do it right." Elena turned in his arms, looked up at this complicated man who'd become so important to her so quickly. You don't have to try to make up for how we started, Victor. I've made my peace with it. Maybe I haven't. Maybe I need this. Need to show you that I can be more than just the dangerous man who bought you to settle a debt. His voice was raw. I want to court you properly. Take you to dinner, walk on the beach, have conversations that don't involve murder or family secrets. I want to know everything about you, Elena. Not just the parts that connect to Mara or the Castellanos, but you. What makes you laugh? What makes you cry? What you dream about when you let yourself dream. I dream about teaching, Elena said softly. About having a classroom full of kids who still believe the world is good. About making a difference in small, important ways. Then you'll do it. I meant what I said before. I'll arrange for you to finish your degree. You can teach wherever you want. Be whoever you want. Being my wife doesn't mean giving up your dreams. What if my dreams don't fit with your life? What if I can't handle being married to someone who lives in constant danger? Victor was quiet for a long moment. Then we figure it out together. Maybe I start transitioning the business toward legitimate operations. Maybe I take a step back, let other people handle the dangerous parts. I've been running this empire since I was 28, Elena. Maybe it's time I started building a life instead of just surviving. The possibility of it made Elena's chest ache. A normal life, or as normal as they could manage, given who Victor was and what he'd done. But maybe that was enough. Maybe they could build something real from the wreckage of how they'd started. Okay, she said. Let's try. Let's take this week and figure out who we are when we're not fighting for our lives. Deal. Victor kissed her forehead. Now, there's a beach down those stairs that's calling our names. What do you say we go get our feet wet? They spent the afternoon on the beach, walking hand in hand, talking about everything and nothing. Victor told her about growing up in his father's shadow, about the pressure of inheriting an empire before he was ready. Elena told him about her neighborhood, her friends, the small joys of a life that had been simple before it became complicated. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Victor pulled her close. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For giving me a chance. For seeing past the monster to the man underneath. For choosing me when you had every reason to run. Victor's voice was thick with emotion. I know this isn't the life you would have chosen, but I'm going to spend every day trying to make it a life you want to keep. Elena reached up, pulled his face down to hers. I already want to keep it. I already want to keep you. They kissed as the sun disappeared below the horizon, and Elena felt something shift inside her. The last pieces of resistance, the final walls she'd kept between them, crumbling away. This was real. They were real. And whatever came next, they'd face it together. That night they made love for the first time, slow and tender, discovering each other without the weight of obligation or the pressure of debt. Victor was gentle with her, reverent, like she was something precious he was afraid of breaking. And Elena let herself be vulnerable in a way she'd never been before, trusting him with parts of herself she'd kept locked away. Afterward, lying tangled together in sheets that smelled like ocean air, Victor traced patterns on her skin. I never thought I'd have this, he admitted. Someone to share my life with. Someone who knows what I am and chooses to stay anyway. I never thought I'd want it. I was so focused on survival, on getting through each day, that I forgot to think about what I actually wanted from life. Elena pressed a kiss to his shoulder. But I want this, Victor. I want you. I want us. Even knowing it won't be easy? That there will always be danger, always be people who see you as a target because of who you're married to? Even knowing all that. Because the alternative is going back to my old life, and that's not living. That's just existing. You've shown me the difference. Victor pulled her closer, buried his face in her hair. I love you, Elena De Luca. I know it's too soon, I know it's crazy, but I do. I love you. I love you too. The words felt right, felt true. And yeah, it's crazy, but everything about us is crazy. Might as well lean into it. They spent the week learning each other. Victor taught her to swim in the ocean, patient and encouraging when she panicked in the deeper water. Elena taught him to cook simple meals, laughing when he burned pasta because he was too busy kissing her to pay attention to the stove. They talked about everything, his plans to legitimize more of his business operations, her dreams of opening her own school someday, the kind of life they could build together if they were brave enough to try. On their last night, they sat on the beach watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. "I don't want to go back," Elena admitted. "I know we have to, but part of me wants to stay here forever. Just us, no complications." "We can come back. Anytime you need to escape, we'll come back here." Victor's arm was warm around her shoulders. "But Elena, we can't hide from the world forever. We have responsibilities, people depending on us. Your family, my organization, all of it." "I know, and I'm ready to face it. Just promise me we'll remember this. When things get hard, when the danger feels overwhelming, promise me we'll remember this week. Remember that underneath everything else, we're just two people who chose to love each other." "I promise." Victor turned her face toward his. "This is our foundation, Elena. Everything we build from here starts with what we found this week. Not the violence, not the fear, not the debt that brought us together, but this, the choice to be together, to build a life worth living." They kissed under the stars, and Elena felt the rightness of it settle into her bones. This was where she belonged, with this man, in this life, facing whatever came next together. The flight back to the city felt too short. Elena watched the island disappear behind them and tried to hold on to the peace they'd found. But as the skyline came into view, she felt herself tensing, preparing for whatever crisis would be waiting. Marco met them at the airport, and his expression told Elena her instincts were right. "What's wrong?" Victor asked immediately. "Nothing urgent, boss. But we've had some interesting developments while you were gone." Marco glanced at Elena. "Your brother showed up at the estate yesterday. Says he needs to talk to you both." Elena's stomach dropped. Marco. She'd almost forgotten about him in the whirlwind of everything else. Her brother, whose debts had started this whole mess, who'd sold her to save his own skin. "Where is he?" Victor's voice was carefully neutral. "Guest house. Under guard." Marco's expression suggested he'd been enjoying his guard duties. "He's pretty nervous about facing you both." "He should be," Elena said quietly. "What does he want?" "Wouldn't say. Just kept asking to see his sister, saying he needed to apologize." Victor looked at Elena. "Do you want to see him?" Did she? Elena thought about her brother, weak, selfish, but still family. Thought about the anger she'd carried since he'd offered her up as payment for his mistakes. Thought about forgiveness and whether it was something she could manage. "Yes," she said finally, "but you're coming with me." They found Marco Russo pacing the guest house like a caged animal. He looked terrible. Weight loss, dark circles under his eyes, the kind of haunted expression that came from prolonged guilt and fear. When he saw Elena, his face crumpled. "Elena! God, Elena, I'm so sorry." "Save it." Elena's voice was cold. "You don't get to apologize and make this better, Marco. You sold me, your own sister, to save yourself from consequences you brought on yourself." I know, and I've hated myself every day since. I've been hiding, terrified that the DeLucas would find me and kill me, and honestly, I deserved it. I deserve whatever punishment you want to give me. Marco's eyes were red-rimmed. "But I had to see you, had to make sure you were okay, that he hadn't—" He looked at Victor with pure fear. "Hadn't what?" Victor's voice was dangerous. "Hurt her? Mistreated her? Is that what you thought I'd do?" "I didn't know. I didn't know anything about you except that you were terrifying and powerful, and I'd cheated you out of money I couldn't repay." Marco's voice broke. "I was desperate and stupid, and I made the worst decision of my life. And Elena paid the price." Elena looked at her brother, this man who'd once been her protector, her best friend, before addiction and desperation had twisted him into someone she didn't recognize. And she felt the anger that had sustained her for weeks start to crack. "You're right," she said quietly. "You made a terrible decision. You hurt me in ways you can't imagine. You took away my choices, my future, my freedom. And I should hate you for it." "But you don't?" Hope flickered in Marco's eyes. "I don't know what I feel, but standing here looking at you, I realize something." Elena took Victor's hand held tight. If you hadn't made that terrible decision, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have met Victor, wouldn't have found this life, wouldn't have discovered that I'm stronger than I ever knew. So in the most twisted way possible, you gave me a gift. Victor's hand tightened on hers. Elena, I'm not saying I forgive you, Marco. I'm not sure I can. But I'm saying that I'm okay. Better than okay. I'm happy, and you need to live with that. The knowledge that your worst moment became something good in spite of you, not because of you. Marco was crying now, shoulders shaking. I don't deserve your kindness. You don't, but I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for me so I can move forward without this anger eating me alive. Elena looked at Victor. What happens to him now? Victor studied Marco with cold assessment. He still owes me, not money. Your marriage settled the original debt. But he owes me labor, time, penance for what he did to you. So here's the deal, Marco Russo. You work for me. Legitimate work. Nothing that will get you killed or arrested. You show up every day, you do what you're told, and you slowly earn back the right to call yourself Elena's brother. Take it or leave it. Marco's head snapped up. You're giving me a chance after everything? I'm giving you the opportunity to prove you're more than your worst decision. Whether you take it or waste it is up to you. Victor's voice was hard. But understand this. If you hurt Elena again, if you disappoint her, if you give me any reason to regret this mercy, I will end you. Not quickly, not cleanly. Are we clear? Crystal clear. Yes. Thank you. I'll prove myself, I swear. Don't swear to me. Swear to your sister. She's the one you wronged. Marco turned to Elena and she saw genuine remorse in his eyes. Maybe it would last. Maybe he'd actually change. Or maybe he'd disappoint her again. Either way, she'd made her peace with it. I'll make this right, Elena. I promise. We'll see, Elena said. Elena. Then she turned and walked out, Victor beside her, leaving Marco to figure out whether he could actually live up to his promises. The house felt different when they entered. Not just repaired, but transformed. Elena realized that the staff had been busy while they were gone. Fresh flowers everywhere, new art on walls that had been damaged, small touches that made the mansion feel more like a home and less like a fortress. What's all this? Elena asked Mrs. Chen, who was supervising the placement of a new painting. Mr. DeLuca's orders before you left. He wanted the house to feel welcoming when you returned, more like a home for both of you. Mrs. Chen smiled. There are more changes in your wing. Would you like to see? Elena followed her upstairs, Victor trailing behind with an expression that suggested he knew what was coming. When Mrs. Chen opened the door to what had been Elena's separate quarters, Elena gasped. The rooms had been completely transformed. The impersonal blues and creams were gone, replaced with warm earth tones and touches that were distinctly hers. Photos of her family on the dresser, books she loved on new shelves, even the blanket from her childhood bed draped across a chair. Victor, what? Your things. From your old apartment. I had them brought here while we were gone. Victor moved to stand beside her. This is your space, Elena. Your sanctuary. I want you to feel at home here, not like a guest in my house. Our house, Elena corrected softly. This is our house now. Our house, Victor agreed. Though I'm hoping you might consider sharing my room most nights. It gets lonely in that big bed without you. Elena turned to him, saw the vulnerability beneath the casual words. Is that what you want? Me in your space, your bed, your life completely? It's all I want, but only if it's what you want too. I'm not going to force you. Elena cut him off with a kiss. I want it. I want you. I want this life we're building together. She pulled back, smiled. Though I'm keeping this space. A girl needs somewhere to escape when her husband is being impossible. Fair enough. Victor's smile was brilliant. I can be pretty impossible sometimes. Sometimes? Try constantly. But Elena's tone was affectionate. Come on. Show me what other changes you made while I wasn't looking. Over the next few weeks, they settled into a new rhythm. Victor began the slow process of legitimizing his business operations, stepping back from the more dangerous aspects and delegating to people he trusted. It wasn't a complete transformation. He was still Victor DeLuca, still powerful and feared, but the violence became less frequent, the threats more manageable. Elena enrolled in classes to finish her degree, dividing her time between studying and learning to navigate the social circles that came with being Victor's wife. It was a strange balance, one foot in the normal world of college and textbooks, the other in the dangerous world of organized crime and political maneuvering. But she managed it. More than managed it. She thrived. Marco proved himself slowly but steadily, showing up every day to work in Victor's legitimate business operations and gradually earning back Elena's trust. It would be a long road, but he was walking it with more determination than Elena had expected. Her parents adjusted to their daughter's new life with a mixture of pride and anxiety. Her mother especially seemed relieved that the Castellano secrets were finally in the open, that the weight she'd carried for decades was shared now. 6 months after their wedding, Elena stood in Victor's office, their office, really, since she'd taken over half of it for her own work, and looked at the acceptance letter in her hands. "I got in," she said, hardly believing it. "The graduate program for early childhood education. They accepted me." Victor looked up from his computer, face breaking into a wide smile. "Of course they did. You're brilliant. When do you start?" "Fall semester. It's a 2-year program, and then I can start teaching." Elena set down the letter, moved to his side. "Are you sure you're okay with this? It's going to take up a lot of my time." "I'm more than okay with it. I'm proud of you." Victor pulled her into his lap. "You're going to be an amazing teacher, Elena. Those kids won't know how lucky they are. I couldn't do it without you, the support, the encouragement, making it possible financially. Stop. You could have done it regardless. You're strong enough, smart enough, determined enough. I just made it easier." Victor kissed her temple. "Besides, supporting your dreams is the least I can do. You've given me so much." "Like what?" "Like a reason to build something instead of just protecting what I inherited. Like showing me that life can be more than survival and vengeance. Like love, Elena. You gave me love when I didn't think I deserved it." Elena's eyes stung with tears. "You're going to make me cry." "Good tears, I hope?" "The best tears." She kissed him, slow and sweet. "I love you, Victor De Luca, even when you're impossible. I love you too, Elena De Luca, even when you're stubborn. We're quite a pair. The best pair." Victor's hand came to rest on her stomach, and Elena caught her breath. They hadn't talked about it yet, hadn't confirmed it, but she'd been feeling different lately. Tired, emotional, certain that something had changed. "Victor, I know. Or I think I know. You've been different the past few weeks. Glowing, people say, though I just think you look even more beautiful than usual." His voice was gentle. "Are you pregnant, Elena?" She'd been waiting for the right moment to tell him, but looking at his face, hope and joy and wonder all mixed together, she realized this was it. This was the perfect moment. "Yes, about 8 weeks, I think. I was going to tell you tonight over dinner, make it special." Victor's kiss cut off her words, and when he pulled back, his eyes were shining with tears. "We're having a baby?" "We're having a baby," Elena confirmed, and the reality of it hit her. A child. Created from love, not obligation. A future built on choice, not debt. "Are you happy?" "Happy doesn't begin to cover it." Victor's hand was still on her stomach, reverent and protective. "Terrified, yes. Overwhelmed, definitely. But happier than I've ever been. We're going to be parents, Elena." "We're going to be terrible at it at first," Elena said with a watery laugh. "Neither of us had the best examples. Then we'll figure it out together. Make it up as we go. Love this kid enough to make up for all the mistakes we'll inevitably make." Victor's expression turned serious. "I want to be better than my father was. Want to give our child the kind of life where they get to choose their own path, not inherit violence and obligation." "Then we'll make that happen, together." Elena rested her forehead against his. "We've already come so far from where we started, Victor. We can do this. We can do anything together." That evening, they told Mrs. Chen first, who cried happy tears and immediately started planning nursery designs. Then Elena called her parents, who were thrilled and terrified in equal measure. Marco, when he heard the news, looked at Elena with such naked hope that she finally, truly forgave him. Her brother was going to be an uncle, and maybe that would be the push he needed to fully become the man he was capable of being. As the sun set over the estate, Elena stood at the window of their bedroom, because it was fully theirs now, her things mixed with his, their lives intertwined in ways both small and profound, and watched the gardens turn golden in the fading light. Victor came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, hands settling protectively over the barely there swell of her stomach. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how this all started. Me walking down that aisle, terrified and alone, convinced I was being sold to a monster." Elena leaned back against him. "And how wrong I was. You're not a monster, Victor. You're the man I love, the father of my child, my partner in every way that matters. I was a monster, though, or close enough, cold, calculating, willing to treat you like a transaction because that's all I knew how to do." Victor's voice was rough with emotion. "But you changed me, Elena. Showed me that I could be more than what I'd been taught to be. That love wasn't weakness, but the greatest strength I could have. We changed each other." Elena turned in his arms. "I was so focused on survival, on just getting through each day, that I forgot to actually live. You taught me to be brave, to fight for what I want, to build something worth keeping instead of just enduring what I couldn't change. Look at us, two broken people who somehow made each other whole." Victor smiled. "Our kid's going to have the weirdest origin story." "The best origin story," Elena corrected. "A love born from darkness but strong enough to create light. A marriage that started as a transaction but became something real. Parents who chose each other against all odds and built a life worth living." "You should write that down. First entry in the baby book." Elena laughed. "I'll work on it after I finish my degree and figure out how to be a functional adult, let alone a parent. We've got time. 7 months to get ready, to prepare, to panic appropriately." Victor's hand came up to cup her face. "And then a lifetime to raise this child and love each other and build the future we want instead of the one we inherited." A lifetime sounds perfect. They stood together as night fell, two people who'd been thrown together by debt and desperation, who'd survived violence and betrayal, who'd chosen love when it would have been easier to choose distance. The future stretched before them, uncertain, challenging, but full of possibility. Elena thought about Mara and Luca, about the love story that had been cut short 20 years ago. Thought about David, the brother Victor never got to know. Thought about all the tragedy and loss that had brought her and Victor together. Their child would know those stories, would understand the cost of the life they'd inherited, the weight of the DeLuca name, the complicated history that ran in their blood. But they'd also know love, safety, the freedom to choose their own path. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. "I love you," Elena whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Victor whispered back. "Thank you for choosing me, for choosing us. Always," Elena promised, "for as long as we both shall live." It wasn't the vow she'd made at their wedding. Those words had been hollow, spoken under duress, meaning nothing. But these words, spoken freely in the quiet of their shared bedroom with their child growing between them, were real. These were the vows that mattered, the promises that would last. And as Elena drifted off to sleep in Victor's arms, safe and loved and finally, truly home, she knew with absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice. The wedding dress had felt like a shroud when she'd put it on 6 months ago, but it had led her here, to love, to partnership, to a future bright with possibility. Sometimes the worst moments of our lives are just doorways to the best ones. Sometimes we have to walk through darkness to find the light waiting on the other side. And sometimes, just sometimes, the monster we're forced to marry turns out to be the man we were always meant to love. Elena smiled against Victor's chest, felt their baby flutter for the first time, and knew that every terrible thing that had brought her to this moment had been worth it. This was her life now. Not perfect, not easy, but hers. Chosen, built, and fiercely protected by two people who loved each other enough to transform obligation into devotion. And that was more than enough. It was everything.